1,000 feet. That was what happened with the World Trade Center.
Yeah, but I assume they have since fixed a lot of those
No.
fire safety concerns.
Yeah, there are no ladders.
Assumption, no, but
What do we need?
I mean, when has there been like a recent
And you're all,
residential fire?
you're all muted now.
Okay.
Thank you.
What do we need for that?
We don't have it right now. Unless there are people online who provide, but they don't.
Well, Neil counts.
Well, the other than have a quorum.
Tiffany counts for forum. and
He's right here.
Yeah,
We have one, two.
Tiffany not on, she's not on. George is there, no, George doesn't count, she's there, remember?
Is there?
So we have 6 people right now. There are 14 people on the committee, so we need 8 people. We need 2 more people.
Okay, I think we'll get started.
But yeah, we can get started. We just
Okay.
can't vote or anything.
All right. Good evening. This is the February 24th meeting of Manhattan Community Board 5 Transportation and Environment Committee. I'm David Sigmund, Chair, joined by Samir Lavingia, Vice Chair.
Hello.
Any items voted on at this meeting will appear at the full CB5 board meeting on Thursday, March 13th. We have 4 items on the agenda today. First is a presentation by DOT on the street safety improvement project for Pershing Square South at Park Avenue between 40th and 41st Street. We then have a DOT presentation on the proposed 6th Avenue protected bike lane safety improvements between 14th and 35th Streets. We have a presentation from Borough President Mark Levine's office on the ghost plate issue. And finally, we have a discussion on a joint CB 456 letter on the potential 34th Street busway. So let's, if we can go around the room and hear, and then committee members online, and we'll take attendance. Nancy, do you want to?
Nancy Gosho.
James Michael Southworth.
Penny Roland.
Paul Waxman. Online, Neil there,
Hi, Neil Miller.
and George. Yeah, George is there. And is that it? There's somebody hiding behind your participant list.
Yeah, so we need to see who's sorry.
Oh,
It's not on the committee.
Charles not on the committee, right?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Colleen, are you gonna lead the charge on the first 2 items?
Yes, yeah.
David Zool here.
Oh, hey, Zool.
Hi, hi everyone. This is Colleen Chattagoon. I'm a senior borough planner at the New York City Department of Transportation. And tonight we have 2 exciting projects that we will be presenting. Thank you so much, David, for identifying those projects. I have with me my colleague tonight who's going to give the first presentation on the Pershing Square South. And that is Melina Lawrence and Jessica Kronstein. So whenever you are ready, please take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, we're all set. So whenever you're ready.
Great. We will upload the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yep, and we can see the presentation.
Perfect. I am Jessica Kronstein. I'm the Deputy Director of Project Development and Delivery for the Public Realm at DOT, and I'm joined by my colleague Melina Lawrence, who is the PM for this project. Next slide. Thank you. So at DOT within the public realm, we really think of the public realm as a feedback loop. So we always start with community partnership and engagement. In this instance, we have worked really closely with the Grand Central Partnership. This falls within their district. The Open Streets program opened a lot of doors throughout the city for us to partners who hadn't previously been able to participate in some of our programs. Those partners open the doors to other types of interventions. So more physical interventions like crossing and intersection improvements, dynamic curb and corridor strategies, and then of course, public spaces, premier public spaces. We bolster all of those premier public spaces with programming and concessions, as well as equity-focused maintenance. All of that has led to sort of more comprehensive planning and policy across the city and leads back to ever more community partnership and engagement. Thank you. Tonight, we are here to talk about a proposal for Park Avenue between East 40th and East 41st, which we refer to as Pershing Square South. We'll discuss this more later. Great. Perfect. Next slide. So, you know, this was identified as a site through the East Midtown rezoning. The East Midtown rezoning's goals overall were to upgrading the area's transit network and pedestrian realm, and advancing the city's Vision Zero program and enhancing pedestrian safety, including pedestrian plazas, shared streets, sidewalk, and crosswalk improvements. I think you all are sort of well aware, but you know, the overall history is to the right. Next slide. And as part of this, we've sort of acted on a couple of sites throughout the rezoning area, with Pershing Square East as one of the sort of early action items, the 43rd Street Shared Street, which is sort of an ongoing work in progress, and we are currently working on the capital design. Pershing Square West opened in 2019. And with that, we sort of kicked off the capital redesign for Pershing Square East. And as those were sort of quickly followed by Lexington Avenue between 42nd and 51st improvements, the street seat and one-way conversion on Vanderbilt. Pershing Square East opened to the public this past winter, and we'll be following with more plantings in the spring once it's warm enough. And then we land here with Pershing Square South. Next slide. With this, I'm going to hand it off to Melina to talk more specifically about the site.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think just following what Jessica was saying, looking at Pershing Square more specifically, looking at the west side was completed, built out capitally in 2019. In 2013, we did a SIP version with interim materials, so kind of the paint, epoxy, gravel, movable planters in 13, and a refresh of that space in 2018. It just opened capitally last year. And then following that, starting to look at the block just to the south between 40th and 41st to see what kind of improvements and tweaks we can make now that both sides of the plaza are open. So taking a slightly larger view of the area, in orange is kind of the project scope for this year, again, between 40th and 41st Street. As you know, it's adjacent to Grand Central Station, so serving a lot of users every day, seeing over 40,000 pedestrians walking through this space daily. These bike docks are some of the busiest in the city, and again, just mentioning this is within the East Midtown rezoning limits. Taking a look at existing conditions. So the bike share network in 2023, the docks that were located in Pershing Square East were had some of the highest ridership in the systems. And so when construction started, this was broken up into two locations, one at East 40th and Park, and the other at East 41st and Madison. And those saw both over 400 daily trips each day. Just kind of giving a benchmark that the system-wide daily average is about 97. And so our bike share team estimates that we still need about 500 additional docks in the area just because of its proximity to Grand Central Station and other land uses to kind of meet the demand for this area. Taking a look at the site specifically, these are the existing markings. Again, mentioning over like 40,000 pedestrians a day. We kind of see folks crossing everywhere which way, and through this intersection kind of leads to crowded and congested sidewalks. there's like parking meters, bike corrals, things like that that eat up into the sidewalk space. On the block between 40th and 41st Street, we see larger delivery vehicles, like Amazon kind of using the space for staging. Crossing Park Ave at 40th Street, you're kind of stuck on these pretty narrow pedestrian islands with cars sometimes zipping in and out of the viaduct and down into the tunnel. And then kind of looking at the feeding and receiving lanes onto this block in either direction, we kind of see one feeding lane and then it breaks up into two for this block and then is condensed back down into one. And so kind of taking a look at what the actual operations look like versus what the markings are, we see that the street doesn't really operate according to those markings. As you can see in this photo, there's 2 travel lanes and 1 parking lane, but I think the reality is a parking lane against the curb, staging up against the viaduct, and then vehicles kind of going down the dashed white as 1 travel lane. We released the pedestrian mobility plan, I think, last year. And what this does, it kind of uses pedestrian volumes and trip generators. So things like land use, so Grand Central Station, schools, parks, things like that, to gauge pedestrian demand. And then using that categorizes each street into a different category, ranging from baseline to global corridor, and kind of setting standards for sidewalk widths to meet pedestrian kind of safety, comfort, and convenience. And so Park Ave, using those standards, is classified as a regional corridor. So seeing like larger groups of people passing each other, lots of destinations in the area. And so we have a suggested sidewalk width of about 20 feet here with a clear path of 12 feet. And the clear path would be free of obstructions like parking meters, bus stops, furniture, kind of things like that. What we're seeing is a width of about 17 feet, but only a clear path of 9 feet. So we would categorize this block of Park Ave as deficient in terms of pedestrian comfort and convenience. And so taking another look at kind of the sidewalks and crossing conditions for this block, again, just taking a look at these narrow islands, kind of only wide enough for about 1 person to stand on, and you have cars coming on either side of you. Again, the sidewalks can get crowded, especially at peak morning and afternoon rush. And there's just a lot of demand for the sidewalk, from utilities to bikes, bike corrals, trash cans, things like that. And then kind of just, again, such high volumes of pedestrians here that we see them kind of crossing every which way at from both sides of the plaza across 41st Street to continue on Park Ave. Kind of diagramming out those vehicle operations that I was mentioning. So on the west side, which is the top side here going southbound, though it's marked as 2 travel lanes, it's effectively 1 travel lane. And so with the existing markings, we would see 1 travel lane coming from 41st, making the right onto Park Ave, separating into 2 travel lanes, and then continuing on to 40th. On the east side, which is the bottom going northbound, we're kind of seeing 1 travel lane feeding this block. It separates into 2 and then drops back down to 1. So we're kind of seeing excess road space, but not a lot of vehicles using this block in particular. So taking a look at the volumes, going southbound during the morning rush hour, 47 cars an hour, which is about less than 1 vehicle a minute. Going northbound, that's 27 cars an hour, which is about 1 car every 2 minutes. Just kind of comparing that with over 10,000 pedestrians kind of crossing this intersection during that morning peak. And then just taking a quick look at the existing curb regulations. So on both sides of Park Ave, and on the side streets, this darker green is showing 3-hour commercial during the day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. with most of these followed by evening 2-hour metered parking regulations from 7 to 10 p.m. And then the red is showing no standing anytime between 39th and 40th. This is kind of like a older rush hour, no standing anytime regulation. But what we see during the day, again, kind of excess vehicle capacity for these couple of blocks. We see delivery vehicles parking along this curb or using this curb for pickup and drop off for the adjacent building. And then moving into design proposal. Looking to overall like shorten crossing distances and improve visibility at intersections, kind of give a little space to those narrow medians so that there's a little more space for folks to stand. Expanding the sidewalks on both sides of Park Ave for this block, adding some more city bike station capacity close to Grand Central, and then adding an additional crossing where we're seeing a lot of pedestrians already crossing. And then taking a look at materials. So everything that we would be looking to do this year would be in-house. So this darker brown is like an epoxy gravel, just like a surface asphalt treatment. We would protect these pedestrian spaces with things like flexible delineators and planters, and then add like associated like markings, so the white thermoplastic, and then signage for any updated curb regulations. And just to kind of like explain the design further, again, looking to add an additional crossing where we're seeing, 11,000 pedestrians in the morning. This kind of middle crossing leading from both sides of the plaza to the viaduct is kind of a similar treatment that we see on 42nd Street under the viaduct. And then looking to kind of just expand sidewalk capacity on both sides of the street to bring this kind of up to the standards that we've set forth in the pedestrian mobility plan. And then for traffic changes, removing one travel lane in either direction so that we have one lane feeding, kind of going southbound from 41st, you have one lane going onto the block and then one lane exiting south of 40th Street. And in the northbound direction, you have one lane entering and then one lane exiting the block onto 41st Street instead of the current markings, which kind of show it expanding into 2 and then reducing back down to 1. And then in terms of curb regulations, between 40th and 41st Street, looking to maintain some loading and drop-off space at the building entrance, so signing this no standing anytime. Along the east curb, maintaining the same regulations of daytime commercial parking and then evening 2-hour metered. But then between 39th and 40th Street, since we're kind of removing some of the 3-hour commercial that used to exist on this west curb, and then some of the use that we saw along the viaduct wall, based on traffic counts and traffic analysis, we can remove this southbound rush hour lane and convert what is currently no standing anytime to match the regs kind of elsewhere. So that would be 3-hour commercial during the day and then 2-hour metered in the evening. And then again, just the trip modeling showed that we need about 500 or more additional docks in the area to meet the rider demand. So looking to add with this proposal about 250 docks to the area. And that includes the docks that were just reinstalled at Pershing Square East. Looking to keep the one that was a temporary relocation at East 40th and Park, and then adding the new dock along the viaduct wall between 40th and 41st Street. And then looking at timeline and the rest of 2025, over the past year, we've been working closely with Grand Central Partnership and working with them and adjacent building ownership to make sure this proposal kind of is still meeting the needs of the block and those adjacent buildings. Right now, we are here with you at CB5, and then hopefully looking to implement in the summer. And with that, that's the end. Thank you very much.
Wow. Let's see. Any specific questions members of the committee have right now, or do you want us to go back into any parts of the presentation?
One
Yep.
specific, is the plan to move the city bike docks back up to what you call Pershing Square East between 41 and 42, so they're closer to Grand Central when the construction's done there?
Yeah, so I think these will be reinstalled, and then there were two sites where the stations got broken up during construction. And looking to maintain this one at 40th and Park. So there'll be docks back in Pershing Square East, keeping this one on East 40th Street, and then also adding a new dock, so adding capacity here.
So you can have three blocks of docks?
Yeah,
Hard to get 500 stalls without spreading it out.
Yeah, before construction, the ones on Pershing Square East were amongst the highest used in the network.
You know, do you know if the users are all streaming south from Grand Central, or is it more distributed than that?
I think we'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure. We don't have that data, but we may be able to get it for you.
Yeah, Nancy.
Do you have a plan for replacement of flexible delineators? They're fine when they're new, but they get run over and ruined constantly. And it gives a false sense of security if they're not up, because cars and trucks just run right over them and run into those areas that are delineated by flexible delineators. So I think that could be a problem. I'm wondering
Yes.
how you're gonna.
So this is Colleen. I can take that question. So we have an excellent team in MassPath. Whenever a flexible delineator is damaged or ran over or missing, I notify them and they come out the next day to replace and repair it. So if you know of any locations, feel free to send them to Marissa or myself. We're happy to get the repairs expedited.
And then I think the only thing to add to that is that we will be adding planters to these spaces as well. The DOT standard planters, the step planters that you see across the city.
My concern was about the narrowing of the distance to cross the street. If it's protected by the delineators, it's not as safe as we'd like it to be, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're saying if in that picture on the right, it's a combination of
Yeah.
both, yeah.
The planters work, but the delineators do not, because they get run down all the time. And then they become enormous tripping hazards.
Yeah, can I just ask a question while we're on this? And the yellow hash marks, can you explain what's going on in that zone? I see it continues north. Yeah,
It continues south.
are you talking about right here?
yeah, well, they're running left, right, yeah.
Yeah, I
And then-
think this is like kind of where the separation of the tunnel. So this is the southbound lane that's merging onto Park Ave.
I see, okay, so it's the tunnel to the right that we're looking at.
And then
Oh, no.
just to add like a little bit more specificity. So typically when you see yellow markings on the street, that means that there is traffic in the other direction on the other side of the yellow markings.
Got it, okay. So this is traffic emerging from the tunnel south of 40th Street, and then what's happening? Moving up onto the viaduct.
Yeah, so this space is the viaduct, kind of separated by these grays, or like
Got
the
it, yeah.
viaduct walls.
Okay,
I think they're showing that there's no southbound tunnel right now.
Right, there's no southbound.
So,
Okay, any other questions in the room or, all right, yeah. Charles, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yep.
I have a question, which is, in regards to the crossings, is there any current audio pedestrian signals for the blind and visually impaired? And if there isn't, is there a possibility of installing some, especially since that's a very busy area, especially near Grand Central? Also, I was wondering, is it possible to use some of the asphalt markings? I think you said there's some sort of markings that may be something similar that's tactile that could be added to the sidewalk to help those who are blind and visually impaired, maybe as like a kind of like a guide, a walk guide, where they could tap their cane and feel that tactile strip along the center of the sidewalk, so they can easily maneuver that space, since it's very that place is very busy with a lot of pedestrians. Have you guys thought about doing that kind of treatment work? And have you been involving any agencies who deal with the blind and visually impaired community, such as the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities, with any of your work when it comes to all these types of treatments and projects that you do? Thank you.
Hey, Charles. Nice to meet you again. I think we've talked about this before in respect to Broadway, but I think so. There are a couple of things we are always exploring more tactile sort of warning strips. We would want to cite them sort of at decision points. I don't know that we have the capacity as a city to include like a guideway, if that makes sense. Just because it's a very large city with many sidewalks. But I think like similar to what we have in all of the pedestrian ramps, right? So the tactile, like the bumps, that's what we would be looking to install. We're still trying to find a material that makes sense within our in-house toolkit for our like paint and gravel installations. And I think we can continue to work with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities on that sort of material search. Yeah. Oh, and then the APS. We can get back to you on whether there are already APS installed here. And then if not, when they will be installed.
Okay. Any questions from the public attending tonight?
So it's Colleen. I just want to acknowledge that Fred Cirillo, who's the president of the Grand Central Partnership, is on this call, is in this meeting with us. And the Grand Central Partnership, they are our maintenance partners. So, we just want to thank them for the amazing work that they do and the fact that, they're participating in this meeting with us here tonight. So I don't know if Fred wants to say something, if you want to allow him to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Fred, if you're on, feel free to raise your hand. Can you see?
He's just in.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Fred, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Colleen. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just here to first thank the committee for taking this up and learning about this project, and also for obviously all the support that you give us throughout the year. I want to thank our friends at DOT because they really have done an incredible amount of outreach and communication, coming out in the field, meeting with the stakeholders who are adjacent to this and working with us, and that we're really just excited to continue to build a network of public space and public realm that this neighborhood deserves. So obviously, we're here if you had any questions for us. But we look forward to continuing on the implementation with this as the summer arrives. And thank you again.
Do you have any specific plans, Fred, for activation in this area?
Well, look, in this area, there's not a lot of opportunity for actually activation. This is really about expanding sort of pedestrian access and obviously increasing the capacity of the bike share. But in terms of beautification, that's a different issue. And yes, our plans are to continue our discussions with DOT because, as I think Jessica mentioned, planters will be an important part of this area, really to extend sort of the garden-like sense of what's happening on Pershing East and what we'll see in the spring, Pershing West and what we'll see in the spring on Pershing East. But the idea of activation in this space, it would almost undo what the goals of this were, which is to add more capacity for people to get to and from the terminal and, north and south on Park. But I will say we're always open to that. I think the activations we're going to see will continue in Pershing West, where we do concerts and obviously have seating and other events. And we will have seating out in the spring when the horticulture elements are included in Pershing East. So you'll see tables and chairs out in Pershing Square East and other programming things as we do on the west side. So there will be activation in this geography, but not necessarily exactly where this project is developing this new space, just north of it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a few other people with their hands up. We'll work our way through.
Great. Jim Wright.
Jim, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It's been good to see the evolution of this area, Pershing Square area. I may have missed it, but I'm wondering about the accommodation for e-delivery bikes. I'm not sure I heard anything about that. It's going to be a natural magnet for delivery bikes to gather, and rather than looking at that as a negative nuisance, I think it would be good to include that in the plans in a positive way and make sure that it's working with the other uses there. So I guess it's a question of what accommodations are being made for that usage.
Hi.
You want to? Yeah. You want to?
Sorry, should I answer? Should
Yeah.
we wait? Okay.
Yeah,
just
no,
make-
that's fine.
So the spaces is, as Fred said, mostly designed to accommodate the very, very high pedestrian volumes that we see in the area. So the space we expect to mostly be filled with circulation. So we haven't designed to accommodate the delivery bikes or the delivery cyclists gathering. That said, the plaza is just one block over, where there is movable furniture in Pershing Square West, as well as the city bike dock in Pershing Square East.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Damayanti. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Damayanti, you can go ahead.
Sorry. I just have some clarification. Pershing Square between 41st and 42nd Street, as we saw, is all pedestrian. So from 48th Street to 41st Street, it looks like we have like a mixed mobility. There are bike areas, and then there are cars traveling, and then of course there are people there. With all the high volume of the pedestrians, I was just wondering, why is there so much of cars turning in? Because it looked like the cars are not that frequent in that section anyway. And then I also saw the parking, 3-hour parking for commercial, and then 2-hour parking after hours for cars in general. This is not a residential area. This is office area. It's not commercial in a sense that there are too many deliveries, I would say. So I was just wondering why is so much of parking there, which is taking away the space from when you have such a high volume of pedestrians. So just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
Well, so you're right, the predominant users are pedestrians, but we do need to make sure that we have sufficient space for pickup, drop off, as well as deliveries. And so we worked pretty closely through Grand Central Partnership. They coordinated with the buildings adjacent to make sure that those buildings had all of the sort of service access that they needed. Currently, the space is used pretty heavily by like delivery trucks and their staging. So I think the 3-hour commercial curb regs are meant to accommodate that use. So rather than having them staged directly adjacent to the viaduct, we are creating a new sort of pedestrian and cyclist space, and then moving them over to the curbside where we've created new regs to accommodate that use.
Thank you. Next up, Janet Liff.
Thank you. Could you put the slide up, the very last slide showing the schematic? Is that possible?
Yep.
Thank you. So I'm actually building on that last woman, the woman who just spoke. I applaud the effort here and the better crossings, but if this is all about adding capacity because we're trying to add extra capacity for pedestrians, I don't see sidewalk where people will walk. And what I see, especially on the eastern side, is like all these little planters, which is, you know, like down that little middle there. And I mean, some of these make sense because you get shorter crossings, but I don't see where people are going to actually walk. And I know you've done a lot of this on Broadway, and people don't walk in the so-called additional pedestrian space because people walk in straight lines. So if you could explain to me, like, where we've gotten additional capacity, that would be great. That's my question.
So I think there is both extra space. So on the west side, you're right, we are like, there is the pedestrian space and there is the buffer, and then there is some queuing space at each of the corners. Same with the south corners, where it is more about queuing space and really sort of buffering the existing pedestrian space. And then on the east side, while there are planters, there is more circulation space adjacent to the curb. And then I think the key points are by the viaduct, where we are making the crossings much safer and giving people a little bit of both queuing space, but a little bit of space to peek out to look for oncoming traffic rather than sort of being faced with the wall.
You mind if I ask the follow-up? Yeah. Do you mind just following up on that, on the east side, on Park Avenue, you know, that section where it like kind of comes in for the parking? How wide is the clear path expected to be between, like, I guess, the edge of the planter and then the curb for the sidewalk?
Where the building?
For the building, right, because there's probably a sidewalk.
There's a plaza there.
Where?
That, the building is the gray, that's all like empty. It's the
lake
Gremlins building, 101 Park Avenue.
Right, I guess what I'm saying is, because there's a sidewalk, right?
Yeah, but
Already there.
But
Yeah, there's like
there
a row of like security bollards right here. So this is like a plaza space. There's like a bit of a grade change. So this is the edge of the building. And then there's a row of like the metal bollards
Okay,
kind of completing the square.
got it. Sorry, I thought the dark gray was like the 3D of the building or something.
So the sidewalk is using the block on the left, to the south of 40th. The light gray
I
is
see.
pedestrian space and the
Okay.
dark gray is, but it's more complicated
Got
on the next block.
And there are steps.
There are some steps.
There's a
under-
raised
yeah.
plaza there too, so it's
I
not
see.
quite.
Yep.
Well, it'd be great if you could draw in that
Right,
plaza,
yeah, so I guess my question
but you're not
is,
gonna walk up and down those steps.
right, so yeah, I guess my question is for that same section where the sidewalk ends. Presumably there's a step down to get to this new textured tan area. What is the width of that textured tan area from the edge of the sidewalk where it steps down to the planter? Like, how much is that clear space? Like, are people gonna walk straight in that small section of gray, of brown?
Yes, so I think right here is 19 feet
Okay,
and then a 9-foot parking lane. So then this
Okay.
would be 10 feet and our planners are about 3 feet wide.
okay, so
So this-
pretty wide, 7
Yeah,
feet.
the planners are a little larger on this, so this would be about 7 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Proportionally, it's not
Right.
drawn right.
So can I ask a question about?
Yeah,
Christopher.
I want to ask a question about this specific area. There are a lot of like bronze or brass, like placards in the sidewalk there. Do you know what's happening to them? Is that already like on the gray part?
Yeah, so we're not reconstructing the sidewalk as part of this project. It's all like in-house materials, like epoxy gravel. The picture on the right shows all the materials that we will be using. So the brass plaques that are in the sidewalk will remain in the sidewalk
And the tree beds?
and the tree beds, correct.
Okay, we'll continue on.
Chair, I just have a
Oh,
question.
yeah.
Do we normally allow questions directly from the public to
Well,
the presenters as opposed to doing just
Yeah, I mean,
comments at the end?
Just
Because,
for practical.
okay,
purposes.
I mean, it's just because we're 45 minutes in.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Something that's
I
trivial
appreciate that.
and people keep raising their hands, so.
Okay.
All right, Daniel?
Yeah, I agree with the comment about flexible delineators being hazards. Because a lot of the time they're laying flat across the street. They're not even standing up because cars are running over them so much. And these are permanent open spaces, so they should have permanent barriers instead of these temporary ones. So yeah, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Miriam Fisher?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay,
Hear you.
thank you. I'm coming from also the point of perspective of people with disabilities. What subways are in the area that might be time to request an elevator, especially since the MTA has now put out a survey for opinions on what areas should have priority. It's hard to envision, the map of where there are nearby subways. I think of 33rd and Park Avenue is one because it's a subway that I often take. But is this the time where elevators can be requested or using the zoning for accessibility and getting help from developers? That's one question. And the other is, what buses are nearby, and is this the time now to be sure that the buses are amenable for everyone with seating and shelters from snow, rain, heat, which is something that we all need and not just ADA, issues. And it's often not on the radar, and that needs a special request to the DOT. So subways and bus stops.
So if I understand your question, it's within the project area here.
Yeah.
Are there any subways or bus stops that, but that's not really the case, right?
Not sure, man.
Can you put that image back up that shows the public transportation in the area? So, well, I guess the subway stops aren't shown, right?
Yeah, fourth.
But they're further up, they're between 41st and 42nd, right?
Yeah, there are a couple that are like through the building, an easement, off of Pershing Square East.
So within the area of this project, there's really nothing that fits that category, right?
Park
All right.
Avenue,
No,
Park Avenue, 33rd.
but that's much further south. That's not
Okay.
in this project
All
area.
right.
Yeah. Okay,
And-
thank you.
And
Oops,
bus
sorry.
stops, bus stops.
No, not in this area.
Okay.
All right, next up is Nina.
Hi, if you could go to the last slide, which is more of a zoom. Yes. When you're going north from 40th Street and turning north on Park Avenue and turning east onto 40th Street, the radius there is much more generous than any of the other ones that I see at any of the corners. And that to me means that cars can go very quickly around that corner. Could you address that question?
Yeah, I think for everything, we make sure that the turns work for the largest FDNY truck, which is much larger than like a passenger vehicle, which is why you kind of see this swoop here to accommodate this turn. Here, we just want to be mindful of the bike lane, so we want to make sure that the car's turning path doesn't cut into the bike lane here in case there are cyclists.
But it is, I mean, was it consciously done as a very large radius in terms of, I mean, if you look at 40th to Park Avenue, that's a much smaller radius. And I'm assuming that also accommodates a fire truck.
Yeah, this was, based on like the tracking like the turning radius for FDNY and larger delivery vehicles, kind of similar to this. So I think it depends on how far you are starting here versus here, if that makes sense.
Well, but that is my question, and kind of maybe I don't know if it's a point or a question, but if you're going from 40th Street and turning onto Park Avenue going south, that radius is much, much smaller. That means that cars and trucks have to slow down much more. And if you're going north on Park Avenue and turning east onto 40th, that's a very, very generous radius. So unless you're talking about not having fire trucks going from 40th down, I don't know why the radii are different, because it's the larger the radii, as you know.
Sure, understood. I'm just going to cut in and say I'm not sure that actually it is that much of a larger radius. So the neck down on Park Avenue as you turn off of 40th onto Park Avenue heading south, it doesn't go on to 40th Street, right? Whereas the one that is on the east side, on the southeast corner, it goes around the corner, so it both offers a little bit of queuing space, and then I don't know that the radius is actually larger.
It is drawn much larger.
But I mean, it's also the
bigger
other part
space.
is it's a pedestrian safety zone as well to Cross Park, right? So that's the other reason for it to be deeper.
Mhm.
Well, it is, I don't know if it's shown incorrectly, but it is now shown at a much larger radius going from 40th east onto, from, I'm sorry, I keep saying wrong, from, turning from the
Onto 40.
Park Avenue onto 40th Street. It is
Yeah.
actually shown much larger radius
Right,
than
but I mean,
from
part of
40
what I'm
onto
saying
Park.
is that's because the crossing distance across Park is so much greater there. And so this is as a pedestrian safety zone, it's wider in order to limit that distance.
I
So-
think, I'm sorry, but I think DOT understands that it's not about the width of it. It can be straighter for longer, going on Park Avenue and be a smaller turning radius. It is, I don't know if it's a mistake, but it is shown, I'm looking at it right now and I'm seeing that it is shown as a much larger radius. And that means that cars can go faster. And I see what you're saying about I mean, as a matter of fact, if you look at the way that the crossing there, you can see that someone can't reach the other side of the street. They're actually, coming against a very, very wide curve.
Okay, the comment is noted and, I'm sure DOT can take a look at that.
That's a road.
Okay. I think that's everybody for public comment. Anybody else, any other of the committee members, on Zoom? So, Colleen, I guess the question is, are you looking for a resolution from us on this?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I would propose, I mean, subject to discussion, I would propose that we provide the same kind of format as the last time we took up one of these proposals, that the resolution would be, I don't know if do you remember the last time we did this? We basically have a description of the proposed project. We have a summary of the feedback that we receive from the committee and public, and we support the project.
I only have one comment.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I support that, and I'll support whatever the committee decides. And I mean, I'm just generally against increasing the capacity of the city bike system, but if you're gonna do it somewhere, doing it right next to Grand Central makes sense. So
Right.
I'm just saying it to say it, but
Okay.
I don't need it.
Okay. Do we have?
We need Oliver to come back from the bathroom before we can make a motion.
Because we don't have.
So
because
now
we need him for-
and Neil and Mohit and who else is,
Tiffany.
they can vote, right?
Is Tiffany on the committee? I forget.
Tiffany is on.
Oh, then we do still have quorum.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Okay.
So, yes,
So one of the comments that came up by three different people, which I think we should fold into this, is about turning the flexible delineators into something permanent and substantial and not, that can't be just knocked over by
right.
anybody.
Yeah, as I said, we'll pick up, the comments that were made.
Okay.
Did you have
Oh, yeah, let me just then, also, sorry, just to like amplify, if not also include it, just to question why there are cars going through there at all. Like one of the comments did say that it's a good idea to just ask why they didn't decide to close the entire street.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that was in consultation with Grand Central Partnership, who spoke to the building operators in the area. They need some access for deliveries. We already have a delivery issue there.
Could I just add though that both sides of this, like it's one building on each side. Like it's not like there are multiple buildings, no residences, and there are no like car necessary entrances. Like I believe all the delivery entrances, everything else are on the side streets already. There's nothing on those streets that requires car access specifically. And a highway runs down the middle of this street. Like there's already a place for a lot of cars to be funneled through. So I don't understand why for less than 2 cars a minute, you know, they need it at all.
Jessica, do you want to provide the final answer on that one?
Yeah, I mean, again, so we have taken both sides down from 2 lanes of traffic to 1. And again, it's really maintaining service access, both pickup and drop off as well as deliveries. While it isn't residential, it is offices as well as businesses, and those businesses need to get their deliveries as well.
Okay. Any other comments or?
Just in response to what the woman had been questioning about the turn lane and the sketch and things like that. It appears from like Google Street View that like the way the drawing is, it does reduce it down to 2 lanes and creates a significantly shorter crossing distance. So there may be something just a little bit off in the perception of how the rendering is working, but I think it's doing a significant job. So
Okay.
just as a comment from looking at it online now.
All right, so we'll take it to a vote. Sure.
Right, do we need a motion in a second, or we just?
Well, I was the motion. I guess we
I'll
can do
second. All right, great.
Thanks.
Ankur, how do you vote?
Are we voting in favor?
Yes, yes. Okay, Annie,
Yes.
Nazara,
Yes.
Needed.
David,
Yes.
James Michael,
Yes.
Mohit is not here, Nancy.
He's on.
Oh, is he here?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I'll vote
I'm sorry. Great, thank you. Just update your attendance. Nancy,
Yes.
Neil,
Present, I had to miss some of it.
okay, so you're abstaining?
Yeah.
Okay. I vote yes. Tiffany? We'll come back to her. Tristan is not here. Zool is not here. He was here, but I guess he left. George? You're muted, George.
You can use your hands again, George, if you,
Yeah, you can thumbs up or thumbs down. That works too. But if you have more substantial comment, we still can't hear you. All right, while he's figuring that out, Joel.
Yes.
Great.
Tiffany, are you on or? No, all right, that's the vote.
Tiffany will be absent. Zool is absent. And did George thumbs up or thumbs down or?
Not visibly.
All right. George, you want a thumbs down or thumbs up or do nothing for abstention? All right. Oh, that was a thumbs up. All right, we did it. Okay. Resolution passes. So I don't trust the camera. 10 yay, 0 nay, and 1 abstention.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So next up is the 6th Avenue Protected Bike Lane project between 14th and 35th Street. And Colleen, whatever we can do to move this one along would be appreciated.
Sure, thank you. So my colleagues, Craig and Preston, are joining us this evening, and they will deliver the presentation. So we'll just put them up now. Thank you.
All right. Are you able to see that?
Yes, thanks.
Great. So my name is Preston Johnson, project manager for the 6th Avenue Protected Bike Lane project. I hope to give you a little background on the project, tell you about what we're proposing, and then there'll be chances to discuss the project and talk about where we're going to go from here. 6th Avenue is a project we've been back to over and over again for decades, really. But most recently, we started the protected bike lanes on 6th Avenue in 2016. And since that time, we've really seen a huge uptick in bike volumes. And so one other thing that we're seeing is that one other aspect of this project area is that there are three moving lanes on 6th Avenue to the south of 13th Street, and then there are 3 moving lanes to the north. And this is an area with 4 moving lanes, and it sort of provides us an opportunity to just sort of rationalize the corridor. As I mentioned, there has been this previous work in 2016. Then later in 2020, we extended the bike lane all the way to Central Park. In 2022, we went further south and extended the bike lane from Church Street to 6th Avenue. And then just last year, we finally closed the whole corridor by putting a protected bike lane in between Lisbonard Street and 13th Street. So one of the issues that we're seeing, as suggested by those increasing bike volumes, is more bike lane congestion. So one aspect is that there are more people riding bikes. Another aspect, like you can see in this photograph, is that people are riding different types of bikes. There are cargo bikes, there are box bikes that people take their kids in, so wider bikes that make it more difficult to pass. And then also there are e-bikes, so you'll have slower and faster bikes using the bike lane, which necessitates more passing. So 6th Avenue has been a priority corridor for DOT for many years. Installing the protected bike lane in 2016 did make improvements, but there's still more that we can do. It is in the top 10 of the most injuries for corridors in Manhattan, and that's something that we would like to be able to improve upon. So the majority of the corridor is, as I was suggesting, widening the bike lane while removing a travel lane for motor vehicles. So you can see the concrete pedestrian island on both the existing and proposed diagrams. Those are not being touched. Those are in the same position as they are now, or they will remain in the same position as they are now. But what happens is that the bike lane shifts, the parking lane shifts, and a travel lane is removed. So it just becomes a more spacious corridor for people riding bikes, and also matches the corridor to the north and the south for motor vehicles. And we already did implement this wider profile from 9th Street to 13th Street last year. We were prevented from going all the way to 14th Street just because there was some construction on that block, and we hope to be able to get to it this year, depending on what their scheduling is. So another way of looking at designers is in these photographs. You see the existing condition on the left, the bike lane, the narrower bike lane, the pedestrian island, and then on the right, an example of what we did further south down at Prince Street. So it's a wider bike lane, makes it a little easier for people to pass each other. There is a little bit of a quirk to the project north of 31st Street, where there are the 4 moving lanes, but there's no parking lane or and so rather than just keep, having a 4-block stretch of just 4 moving lanes and then it goes back down to 3 moving lanes, we're proposing to convert that curbside lane to a bus lane, just to it'll connect to the bus lane that exists to the north of 35th Street. you can kind of see the difference at 34th Street on the left. You've got the 4 moving lanes, and then on the right, you've got the 3 moving lanes and a bus lane. Another thing that we hope to do is improve intersections along the corridor. So on the left, the photograph on the left, you can see is our typical condition, a mixing zone. That was the way that we would handle intersections more frequently, say when this project was going in 9 years ago and earlier than that. You can see it's kind of a turn lane, but it doesn't prioritize either mode, whether it's the motor vehicle or somebody on a bike. They have to kind of determine that who goes first, you know, in a kind of a little quiet negotiation between the two. And as a result, there are a lot of people riding bikes that don't love this. So more recently, we've been upgrading mixing zones to what we call offset crossings. An example you can see in the photograph on the right. Rather than just kind of like tossing the 2 modes side by side and they make that negotiation, there is more of a prioritization of the through movement of people riding bikes. And then when you're making that turn across the bike lane, it's a tighter turn, so your car is reoriented. It gives you a chance to look up the bike lane to make sure there's nobody coming. Sort of the same situation for pedestrians as they're crossing the street. It gives the person driving a chance to, you know, make sure that there's nobody walking across the street as they make that turn. In one situation at 29th Street, we are proposing to install a split phase signal. At this location, the turning volumes are a little bit higher than the others, and it makes it difficult to install an offset crossing. So what you can see in the little diagram on the left is the first part of the phase where the pedestrians, the bikes, and the through traffic, they all have a green light. And so they're all able to go. And then in that second phase, the bikes and the pedestrians are held while left turning vehicles are able to turn across. And it sort of removes any conflict between those 2 modes. And at the same time, the through vehicles continue to process even as the left turns are happening. And so just to wrap up, we're hoping that we can increase the width of the bike lane to accommodate the higher volumes, the greater mix of faster and slower bikes, and also wider bikes. This does entail removing a moving lane. It does actually come with the reintroduction of some parking because mixing zones take up more parking, take up more curb space than an offset crossing. So at each one of those 7 intersections, we'll be able to add back a couple of parking spaces. And we think that some of these, aside from the additional parking, we think that the offset crossing is a more sort of popular and equally safe design than the mixing zone. And we're hoping to install this project in 2025. And I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Nancy, yep.
Can you go back to slide 13, please? Is that a 2-lane, 2-way bike path on the right there?
No, it's a one-way, and we're definitely not proposing.
The guy in the red shirt is going downtown.
They're going correct direction.
Well, this is 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, just to be clear.
Okay.
So it's a 2-way street. There is actually on this street, there's a bike lane on the other side of the street, but So we're not proposing to turn Sixth Avenue into a
Okay.
two-way street,
Okay.
but just to give you an idea of
Okay.
the intersection design.
I was just confused. Thank you.
Nothing, Joel?
I got a lot of comments.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I have comments for later, but I'll just stick to questions. Do you guys have any information about, the actual increase in numbers of cyclists using that particular corridor over time? And then like, is that correlated to particular times of day, et cetera? Because parts of that area are very crowded. So I'm just wondering if there's specific information about, how that's increased. And like how it's directly to the vehicular traffic, that uses that exact same kind of area, and where the measurements sort of were taken here, because it's like you have three very different traffic zones in that area from 14th to 35th.
Yeah, these counts were taken at 26th Street. We do have the finer grain detail. I don't have that right in front of me about the time of day or, weekend we do have the weekend and the weekday. But I don't have the details on that, but there's definitely the trajectory is very positive over the, just even that 5 years. Over a longer time period, it's been even greater. While with motor vehicles, it's been much more stable. I think, especially if, congestion pricing sticks around with us, I think that's something that we can probably project forward as well.
Okay, and is data ever taken more granularly, like time of day, hourly, rather than the entire day? Because there are also like floods, like with congestion pricing, there are floods of traffic at certain times on that corridor.
Yeah, absolutely. These are actually just 12-hour counts. We get counts throughout the day from 7 to 7. We get them every 15 minutes. So that is definitely something that we have. Like I say, I don't have that at my fingertips, like what the peak time of day is. It doesn't usually align with what you see with like motor vehicle peak times. It's a little bit later, little later in the morning and a little offset. But so that might be a benefit to avoiding conflicts between motor vehicles and bikes.
Thank you.
Yeah, question. Why did you choose parking instead of green space or more pedestrian space with the extra space that's left over?
Right. So because this is a bus lane and a truck route, our engineers do favor the 11-foot lane over the 10-foot lane, and so that's a reason for that design choice. Yeah, we have considered the other possibilities, but I think as far as the amount of space that we have, that is the limiting factor, is like getting us to those 11-foot travel lanes.
And that continues down the work that you did south of here. That's how the lanes are marked now.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it north of there as well?
Yeah, we don't have. Are you suggesting like an extended sidewalk pedestrian space, or is that how? Just to clarify. I mean, and if just to clarify, that it's not totally clear, the pedestrian islands, like in this parking space alongside this pedestrian island, that actually the pedestrian space there at the island will be extended. I mean, I guess I should, it should be that kind of like truffle color that we use. So crossing distances will shorten for pedestrians. It'll just be 44 feet across, and rather than what we have here, 49 feet, it'll shorten by 5 feet. But that'll just be at the islands.
Right, that's all great, but sorry, my question was more about you said you're changing from the mixed zones to the other type of turn that's like,
Offset crossing.
offset, thank you. And that was gonna give extra space, and you were like, we're gonna give that to parking. So my question was, why parking and why not something else?
So for example, just to be concrete, sometimes you'll see in those spaces like bike corrals in like a truffle area, right? So like, I guess if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking why give it back to parking instead of put something else?
Blenders, anything.
Well, no, just to be clear that a mixing zone, like this distance is like 90 feet, while this distance is just 40 feet. So there will be a lot of space on this island, and that will be, potentially programmed as a bike corral or other types of uses. And, if there's, I think speaking to CB4, I think there was some interest in planters. But so it largely will be a pedestrian space, but 90 feet away from the intersection, currently our default would be just to put that as parking unless there was like a request for some other use.
And how do you make that request?
Go ahead. I mean, if you have, are there particular intersections or?
And raised a good follow-up if it's okay do we know what kind of parking that is like used as? Is it like 3-hour commercial? Is it like residential all day? Because I mean, the core of the matter of what it's getting to is like, why not just get rid of the parking and keep the traffic lanes or something like that? Or why not get rid of the parking lane and put planters in? So I think that's the core of it's wondering if there's really a use case that's necessary for parking, like on both sides of the street in that corridor.
Sure. I mean, I think that 3-hour commercial is the typical use.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, Charles, you had a question?
Yes, can you hear me, chat?
What?
Yes. I was wondering, sorry, and I'm not able to visually see these slides. I just wanted to have a question about confirmation on something, just a bit of clarification. So, for example, there's a small, tiny pedestrian island in front of Trader Joe's on West 21st Street and 6th Avenue, which is also a very congested pedestrian block in front of that supermarket. So you said about extending the bike lane. So would it be, you said the island isn't moving, so is there going to be more bike lane in front of the island, or what's happening with that? And will that island, as an example, be extended because it's a very small pedestrian area? And also, is there any thought more to pedestrian safety? As we know, those bikes go very, very fast. I go to that supermarket a lot. I was wondering, is there a way, again, to have more audio pedestrian signals along that corridor with all these changes, especially for vital businesses such as supermarkets like Trader Joe, and there's also a Fairway on West 25th, West 26th and 5th on 6th Avenue. And have you guys thought about any other measures to slow down the bikes that are going, because that bike lane, like I said, I've stood there before to cross that avenue outside Trader Joe, and I've heard those bikes go by, and my home health aides have told me those bikes go very, very, very fast, and it is very scary for pedestrians crossing that avenue.
Yes, I understand. As far, I mean, I'll see if I can describe this in a way that you can understand without the visuals, but the curb and the island are currently 11 feet apart. And that's something that was designed to provide and maintain access for emergency vehicles or maintenance vehicles, and that will continue. But currently, the bike lane is 6 feet, and there's this buffer, 3-foot buffer that separates the parking lane and the bike lane. And so currently, the bike lane, or in our proposal, the bike lane becomes 10 feet. So it pushes out 4 more feet. The buffer also remains 3 feet, but it kind of goes beyond the extents of the concrete island. So it's a way of increasing the width of the bike lane, even though we don't want to move, dig up these concrete islands. And also, I think the other aspect of what you're saying is there will be this painted pedestrian space that'll kind of wrap around the side of the concrete island facing the travel lanes. So that'll shorten that crossing distance by 5 feet when you're crossing 6th Avenue. As far as the speeds of the bike lane, of bikes in the bike lane, we do have a toolkit related to some of those concerns. We will sometimes put rumble strips, kind of like paint these lines on the bike lane that sort of, kind of are slightly jarring to somebody riding a bike, and it's more comfortable if you slow down. As far as I'm not sure if any audio signals are in our toolkit, but I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Neil?
Yeah, I guess just following up on that, when you installed this in the places that you've widened the bike lane to have like 2 lanes to be 10 feet across, do you happen to have any data about accidents or bike crashes or pedestrians getting hit, if that went up, went down?
Yeah, I think that a lot of that is still pretty new. My colleague Craig might have a little more information on that data.
Good question. That, as Preston noted, it is still pretty new, so everything, and we are looking into it. We do have like a kind of like a post analyst protocol going on, but I think it's just too new to say anything definitive. So we'll have to just keep following up with you, and keep looking at these wider lanes to get back.
Okay.
It
Thank you.
takes a bit of time to get the reports from PD. That's kind of the general leg, like a year or 2 at least.
Now it goes under the heading of couldn't hurt.
And
You don't know that.
and just to clarify, so there's no construction, no like cement or streets being moved. This is mostly like changing the lines and maybe like rumble strips or things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the green paint, the truffle colored paint that for pedestrian spaces, the white thermoplastic, that's basically the toolkit.
So it
the
would be
bike
pretty
symbols.
easy to change afterwards, or relatively.
Yeah, I mean, if it was discovered that it was a horrible mistake, there's no concrete involved, but I don't think any of our early data has suggested that that would be the case.
Okay. Christopher.
Sorry, this just it always kind of comes to mind when I see these extra wide bike lanes. Why not two-way? Is it just a space thing?
I mean, two-way brings up a lot of complications at intersections. That's the main issue. It's just, you know, it is a whole different direction of traffic that currently nobody's looking for. But you also have to like you have to like create a different types of signals, different types of ways of getting the bikes safely across the street. We probably wouldn't usually when we have a two-way bike lane like that, it's running alongside like a flat edge, like a park, or you know, the greenway along the waterfront, where there are just not as many intersections. When you have intersections every 200 feet this way, it becomes a more complicating factor.
Charles, do you have another question or?
I forgot to add if you asked me if it answered the question, I forgot to add, could you add audio pedestrian signals to the toolkit, please?
We can, yeah, we'll bring that up with our engineers.
It turns, and it's Colleen. With a lot of our projects, we are looking at audible pedestrian signals at, you know, these corridors. So I know we do have a contract and we are installing them citywide, but in moving forward, we will add these locations as requested to see whether they're feasible, okay? So thank you for always bringing that up.
Okay. Comments?
Do you want to do public first?
Well, let's get through the committee and then we'll.
All right.
Yeah, jump in.
So I'm just gonna go back to what I think Jessica was her name, who spoke at the beginning of the Pershing Square presentation. And I think the first thing she said was that when DOT wants to propose a public realm change, they like to work with the people who are affected in the area. So we didn't find out about this until 5 days ago. It wasn't posted until 5 days ago on the website. And there are no postings on 6th Avenue. I just walked up and down most of this area. I just don't think this is right for discussion until our public has a chance to weigh in. I have a ton of comments on problems with this, but I really don't think it should be voted on tonight. We need to come back when people in the public in our community have a chance to come here.
Hey, Joel, it's Colleen. If I could just add to the notifications that we have done, we had a pre-meeting with the community boards and with the elected officials. We also posted the meeting flyers. We sent it to all of the elected officials and the community boards. We also posted this on social media. So I would imagine that we did do our homework and did a lot of outreach.
You may have done yours, but you didn't, but this community board didn't notify its constituents. The first this committee knew about this was the 19th when David sent us an email. And it was not on the community board website before that day. So and there's nothing posted on the street unless you posted them, they all got ripped down. But usually there's only a few that get ripped down and most of them stay. So I don't think this is right for discussion today. If we're gonna go ahead anyway, I'll start, but I don't think we should be voting on this.
Well, go ahead and whatever comments you have, let's get them on the record and then we'll see where we are.
So in one of the slides, I think it was page 6, you talked about eliminating, or slide number 6, I'm not sure. That one, you talk about eliminating conflicts between fast e-bikes and slower regular bikes. You know, one of the goals of Vision Zero is to calm traffic, not to allow for increased speeds. That's among the reasons the DOT came to us to reduce travel lane width. I understand here they have to be widened because it's a truck street. That I have no objection to the 11 foot from 10 foot, but to take a a 6-foot bike lane, which is already 50% bigger than DOT's standard, than AASHTO standard, than required for a one-way bike lane with a 3-foot buffer and parking protection. It's already 50% bigger than it needs to be. The traffic increase that you showed on one of the other slides was maybe 15 or 20%. It's not enough to double the size to 250% of the standard requirement for a one-way bike lane. All you're doing by doing that is allowing e-bikes to go even faster. They already are capable of going 60 miles an hour. See them going 30 to 40 all the time on 6th Avenue. It's way too dangerous for pedestrians already. You're making it worse. You're also facilitating by making a 10-foot wide bike lane with a 3-foot buffer, making it even easier for bikes to go the wrong way in that bike lane, which is one of the biggest dangers in this district. It's the biggest complaint we receive. It's the biggest complaint that comes up at every precinct meeting. It's the biggest complaint that every elected official in this district, even federal ones, receive from their constituents. If you could turn to slide 11, I think it is. So this, I don't think this reflects what's there now at least between 32nd and 34th, because those are already two-way bike lanes.
Right.
So what are you planning to make those one-way again, which would make things a lot safer?
Every block is different. This is just a typical, just to illustrate, we're not actually touching anything on the west side of the street. That all that's changed here is that travel lane on the east curb becomes a bus lane.
East curb. Okay, so you're not having parking on the east curb. It's only one side parking in the places where there is parking.
I mean, here, well, right, there will not be parking on the east curb.
Can you go to slide 14? So the setup on the left-hand diagram, that already exists on many intersections throughout the city. What that lighting setup does is makes it nearly impossible for a pedestrian to cross the street. When the light turns green, when the walk sign goes on, at the same time, the little bike signal that's green goes on, and bikes and those few that stop at the red light immediately jump out and cut off the pedestrians. Pedestrian can't cross the street safely. As soon as the bike lane light turns red, the cars start going. So there's no safe time for a pedestrian to cross the street in this setup. It just doesn't work.
I mean, most bikes are typically going straight, and the pedestrians are walking straight. I mean, I don't see that when I'm at this type of signal.
Try to walk down 9th Avenue on a Saturday when people are out shopping, you'll have trouble crossing the street. But you introduced this slide by saying that West 29th Street was a very busy intersection for bikes to turn, and that's why you were putting that there. So which is it?
No.
It's busy or it's not busy?
No, sorry. That's the reason that we install this is because it's a heavy turn for motor vehicles, not for bikes. And so what this does is separate those two movements of the turning motor vehicles and the through pedestrians and the through bikes.
Okay, but there is no time within this entire signal cycle for a pedestrian to cross safely if there's either a car or a bike making the turn. That's my comment. That's not a question. You talk about rumble strips as, maybe you'll install some rumble strips to slow down the bikes. So what rumble strips do on some of the avenues and even some of the cross streets, like where you put them in front of hotels, is it basically gets the e-bikes and the regular bikes to go out into the traffic lane because they don't want to slow down. Or they go into the 3-foot buffer lane, or they go into the parking lane if there's room there. So it doesn't slow traffic down unless you put them all the way across the street, which you've done with speed bumps on a few streets in front of schools. When they go all the way across the street, they work, rumbles, the speed bumps. Or if you did rumble strips all the way across the street, they might work. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people slow down for them. But rumble strips do not make bikes, or especially e-bikes, go slower. In fact, they tend to speed them up because they send them out into traffic where they have to speed up to keep up with the cars to the extent they're not already doing that. I guess, I don't know. I have a lot of other comments. I get my general feeling is this is unnecessary. I think it's unnecessary to take a bike lane that's 50% wider than it really needs to be by your own standards and make it 250% wider than the standard. That space, I think, should properly be used for pedestrian space, which is desperately needed on 6th Avenue, particularly in the 30s. So in terms of, lowering the number of travel lanes and traffic lanes, I think that would be great, but not for bikes, not for a wider bike lane. I'm sorry. The bike lane that's there is wide enough without creating additional dangers and additional problems for pedestrians. Make more space for pedestrians. That's my final comment for the moment.
Okay.
I mean, we gotta go home at some point, so I can't keep talking.
Yeah. Want to thank you for the thoughtful presentation. I'm supportive of the changes, and I think it's a thoughtful presentation to improve traffic flow on this street.
So I have a few things similar to David, and I'm generally in favor of creating more space for pedestrians and safer conditions for pedestrians. But in addition to this, I just want to go through a few things pretty quickly that I think in an area like that, reducing traffic from capacity from 4 through lanes to 3 doesn't really make sense, especially there's going to be double parking. There's going to be weird things like that cause buses to have to go out of the bus lane. It's just going to create even more congestion in that area. This proposed new widening and the sort of reapportionment of the way things work. It's my view that bike lanes are already a major cause of congestion throughout the city, and that we're overly dedicating too much of our street space to something that is not used 24 hours a day and not used significantly enough. It's also why I asked about the timing and patterning of certain things, that we shouldn't be dedicating space to one form of transportation over another. We need to figure out how to be able to flexibly and dynamically allocate space among different forms of transportation and people. The other thing that strikes me is that by widening it to be that long, it's going to sort of enable this new type of electric bike powered last mile delivery vehicle to kind of streak up through those traffic areas. And like a lot of the sort of online retailers are shifting to this model, especially within New York City. So that becomes another cause of concern to me. And then how do we get, what's the next one? Oh yeah, and this brought up to me, thinking about the 29th Street signal area, that is a very, very heavy, high traffic intersection that basically leads to that entire middle area of the street from 29th to 35th being completely clogged at huge amounts of time during the day. And so to me, reducing through traffic, particularly in that kind of 28th to 35th Street, 42nd Street corridor, is just, it's not going to be a good thing. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but that with it looking like congestion pricing is disappearing, this is going to be even worse going forward. So then after that, just quickly to get into the more safety issue things that I also think, especially with the prevalence of e-bikes, which are motor vehicles, just driving and ripping up these corridors, it's incredibly dangerous to have it's a protected bike lane doesn't protect the pedestrians. It just protects the e-bikers from cars. And so then if we're crossing the street and we're standing in the middle of the island waiting for it, so now I have like an Amazon electric powered e-bike driving 25 miles an hour behind me on one side, and then I have a truck driving 25 miles an hour in front of me on the other side. And it's like it just creates an incredible risk for pedestrians overall. And I'm going to lead that into just an anecdotal thing that, like, I got nailed about a week and a half ago by a person on an electric city bike and who just failed to yield. I'm a 6'3", 200-pound guy. I have bruises up and down the left side of my body. I probably have some very serious injuries to my left arm. And it's just like, if I can take that hit and I'm still pretty hurt, and then the woman standing next to me, she would have been like incredibly hurt, if not hospitalized. So like, to me, like, until there's registration, until there's enforcement, until there's accountability, and until there's better tracking of data and just understanding like what's happening more quickly, more effectively, it's going to be really, really hard for me to support any sort of expansion or further use of bike lanes or space, public space for bike and e-bike particular uses. That's
okay.
I'm sorry to hear about your incident there, but just to clarify, it absolutely is the case that pedestrians benefit from protected bike lanes. We usually see 20-30% reductions in crashes when we install a protected bike lane.
Follow up to that. I've lived in this city for 40 years. I've been hit by bikes at least 3 or 4 times. I've never been hit by a car. So from my experience, I don't view it that way.
Christopher, did you?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I also, I have a lot of comments, but I don't want to make too many. But let's go to the request, because, thank you again.
Well, we'll have to do we have people waiting from the community.
Before I make any request?
Well, what kind of request are you making?
Oh, well, but I thought the request was during the comment period. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah, whatever he's gonna.
All right.
I thought you were fine where you were.
Oh, you're making, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no,
I didn't.
no,
Okay.
I'm not trying to like make a resolution or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
No, I mean, we were talking earlier about what happens to extra space. I mean, the base question here is from one private building to another private building or whatever we have the buildings for. We have a ton of public space and what are we going to use it for? And this is a very good proposal for how to ensure that we dedicate less of it to one of the most deadly things on the planet, which is the automobile. There's no question that millions of people a year die at the hands of this. It's just something that I don't know why we accept it, but we do. And I don't know why we run it through the middle of our cities, but we do. So this is absolutely 100% a question of where we ever put more lanes, we're going to encourage more use, and 100% we should encourage more use of bicycles. I do think you're being short-sighted in keeping it one way. I think it should be a two-way thing. I think we should have two-way bike lanes everywhere because number one, that's what people are going to do anyway. So we should put all the infrastructure that's necessary, all the signaling, everything we need to make sure everyone can safely bike in both directions. I think that's the best thing for every avenue, no matter how much extra space it takes up. And I think it's safer because, again, the least safe travel setup you have is any vehicle moving in one way with nothing coming from the other direction, right? That encourages, and that's what we have all the avenues set up for cars, and it's absolutely wrong. So it would be better if we had a two-way bike lane. It would be better if the default was not parking. If you didn't say, oh, we have extra space, let's throw in more places for people to dump their cars, but the default were more space for pedestrians, no question. I think they should, for people on foot, for plazas, for green space, of which we have far too little in this city. I do understand that you have a lot of constraints, and so I think that for now, this is an okay plan. Like someday, perhaps it could be a two-way bike lane. Someday, perhaps we'll take more of those travel lanes away as hopefully we see people turn away from the deadliest and most disgusting form of transit that exists. I think I made the request that I wanted, and just that, like, any extra space gets prioritized for pedestrians and not parking. That again, I think all of this in general will be safer. I certainly don't want to trade anecdotes. but I will anyway. Because I've been doored multiple times while riding the bicycle, and I've gotten just as many bruises. I'm very sympathetic, but it has happened. Cars have been doored coming down. I think it was 9th Avenue with a taxi. The taxi just left. That's it. You know, I've been doored by someone who got into an altercation with me after dooring me. He was in an area that was marked not even for cars, like it was a lined area. So, I mean, again, the more separation we can have between pedestrians and bikes and cars, the better. What you've come up with here is fine given the constraints, and I'll support it for what it is now, but I do hope we do more for pedestrians going forward.
Yeah, I generally am very supportive. I am a big fan of split phase signaling. You know, when we don't have it, it's the same problem. Like bikes still turn because they are supposed to go with a pedestrian signal. This doesn't make that any worse, and it makes the issue with cars a lot better. And when I ride down the extra wide bike lanes, especially with my friends who are new to biking or not comfortable with biking, they feel a lot safer. So it's nice to get people who are beginners out on the street onto a bike. And I, as an experienced biker, also feel more comfortable, especially because I tend to be slower. So it means that people can go around me. You know, I'm going like 8 miles an hour, which is pretty slow. So someone going 12 miles an hour can, you know, go around me, which I think is better for everyone. Then I would agree with the comments Christopher made. And in general, I think we should be reducing the travel lanes as much as possible. So, you know, as another commenter said, it might be nice to have an expanded sidewalk instead. I would say, yes, we should do both. We can have an extended sidewalk on both sides and just have one travel lane.
Okay, well, can we, we'll open up the phone lines.
Do you want to go Charles first?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Charles.
Can you hear me? Yeah. My comment is, you know, I just recently on Friday, I was at a accessibility and safety street mayoral candidate, you know, discussion group at First Unitarian Church that was hosted by Transportation Alternative, and I'm very pleased. I love the candidates that, you know, brought up about accessibility, people with disabilities. And, you know, a lot of times, as a lot of the candidates said, you know, that section gets, unfortunately, ignored a little bit. So I really hope that the DOT can do more to not just think about cyclists and pedestrians, but also think about and include the pedestrians with disabilities, senior citizens, things like that, and really think about how they use the sidewalks and crossings and things like that. Because for someone like me, I'm forced to hold my white cane out, shoulder, you know, level horizontally across the bike lane to flag them to stop, because it is, just imagine being blind and you're trying to cross that bike lane, and you know that some of them, unfortunately, there are good cyclists and there are bad cyclists, and a lot of times there are those who they just cycle through anyway, and it is very frightening. I'm hoping that more can be done for pedestrian safety, and but also more thinking outside the box and engagement with senior citizens and pedestrians with disabilities. Thank you.
Right. Okay, do you want to?
Yeah, so the first up online is Paul Crickler.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you very much for a chance to speak. I just want to give my experience, the Third Avenue bike lane change and street safety change that happened a year and a half ago. Wider bike lanes, less car traffic, less lanes for transit. In a year since then, the numbers came out, I think last week, a 40% reduction in injuries, a reduction also in people dying, being killed, and it's across the board reduction, as I said before, by DOT, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. So everyone is safer. Simple example, you've taken a 100-foot wide street and made it 70-foot wide or something like that to cross when you put the island there. I know very clearly on Third Avenue in the 90s, there were 5 lanes of traffic and cars would just take off zooming in drag races because there was so much space. Making it 3 lanes has calmed them down, and actually people are much safer, including the people driving. The one thing I want to comment on in particular, which I love about this design, is the offset crossings. I have found the mixing zones on First and Second Avenue terrifying in comparison. I won't let my teenage kids ride to school, which they should be able to. They're 17 years old. Because when you mix with cars, it's dangerous. You get into a jostle with these cars. They cut in front of you, they don't make room, and it's dangerous. So conflict is dramatically reduced. So when you have these offset crossings, the cars, it's a miracle to watch it. The cars slow down, they're turning left to go across you, and they're looking at you because they've slowed down dramatically. And I've never yet had one get into conflict with me. So I applaud you to do these offset crossings. I would love it if you'd go back and retrofit everything else you have as well with these everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Damayanti.
Yes, thank you. This is a great discussion. Since I'm working on car-free Broadway, our group will be talking about that later also. We make a presentation to CB5 about initial campaign that volunteer group we are doing right now. So that'll be like from 14th Street to Central Park, car-free Broadway. So the cars will be gone, it'll be pedestrians and it'll be bicyclists. But even so, we think because of the modality of what's happening here, people are afraid of bicycles, bicycles are afraid of cars, people are afraid of cars, everybody's afraid of everyone. So I think the separation, a distinct separation between people's space on the sidewalk and the bicyclists to start with, that'll be very important. So rather than just have a 3-foot buffer, which is at the level of the street, I think somebody talked about that CB4 has suggested that we have a raised planters. So why not create continuous raised planter? We'll add some greenery. We'll add some shade if you have some trees there. And that could be on both sides of the bicycle lane, where people can then also enjoy the greenery on the sidewalk side. And then people can also the bicyclists can also see the greenery between the cars and the bicycles. And in between, maybe a couple of locations, you have a cutout in that buffer because somebody has to be delivering something or someone has to be crossing something or whatever. So that could be done judiciously. And that way, I think people will be safer. So of course, the question that I wanted to ask Mr. Johnson about any data on accidents and fatalities between the time when we did not have any buffer and now at present time. Is there anything that I can access to on a DOT website or somewhere? Because that'll be very helpful. As I said, I'm working on something as a volunteer group campaign, and everything that I'm hearing today is going to be very useful to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what kind of data you were looking for. We do have some studies talking about the safety benefits of protected bicycle lanes. Like I was talking about earlier, there's typically a 20 to 30% reduction in injuries that comes from that street design.
In how many years? Is it like do you have like a data from say from like 10 years ago and now?
I mean, what we usually do is we do a 3-year before and after when we make a street change. I think there are, as we saw like during the pandemic, there were forces greater than the street design that were causing increases of crashes. So I think it might confuse the issue if you have too long of a frame. I think the way that we've done it in the past of making a change and then comparing the 3 years before and 3 years after is kind of the clearest way to try to identify that it's that change that made the difference rather than some sort of external factor. And I think if you look on our if you Google New York City Department of Transportation, protected bike lane study, safety, something like that. You'll probably get that information.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they did 5 days ago.
Yeah, so we were just talking about the Third Avenue change, the bike lane change, and that was just published a few days ago. So that's probably the most recent case study.
All right. Next up, Daniel Sutton.
Yeah, I think the bike lane on 6th Avenue is very exposed. Like there's no barrier between the bike lane and the car traffic lane, so it's dangerous. So if there could be permanent barriers there, that would be a lot better.
A barrier between the bike lane and the parking lane? Is that what you mean?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next up, Ira. Ira.
Yeah, Ira, yeah. So you've talked, Mr. Johnson, you've spoken about the 11-foot travel lanes being expanded from 10 feet because of trucks. It sounds like you're kowtowing to trucks. Why couldn't the parking lane that's 9 foot now become 11 foot and those travel lanes could remain at 10 feet, maybe one 11-foot travel lane? That's it.
The 11-foot travel lane is the standard that our engineers have for bus lanes and truck lanes. They feel that that's the safest way. I mean, we understand the concerns of having a moving lane that's too wide, that can encourage speeding. But when you're talking about larger vehicles, that sort of offsets and brings in different safety considerations.
Thank you. Next up, Janet Lipp.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I live right near 8th Street and 6th Avenue. I regularly use 6th Avenue to get into Midtown. I walk, I bike, I take transit. So a few things. I invite all of you to actually come downtown and see this because it was recently implemented, just south of 8th Street from Canal to 8th Street. They removed a lane and they did this exact treatment. CB2, we have not received a single complaint. I serve on the transportation committee and we get any complaints and we have none. And it might be surprising, but I find that when the lanes are more welcoming, people actually bike in a more sensible manner. It's kind of interesting to watch. And even with these double wide lanes, I see very little counterflow biking. And as well as making everything safer, as is shown on 3rd Avenue, it makes everything much more pleasant. 3rd Avenue now is actually turning into like a street that I would normally avoid, is inviting to actually walk on and be a pedestrian on because you're not next to a highway anymore. So I think this is a great project and sure we could do more with greening and everything, but as a start, I think this will be a huge improvement. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chair of the Board of Transportation Alternatives.
Yes.
Next up, Jim Wright.
Hi, thanks for taking my comments again. So I travel up and down 6th Avenue multiple times a week as a pedestrian and as a biker, and including the corridors above and below CB5. So I strongly support this proposal. I echo previous comment from Janet that actually a wider bike lane does promote more civil bike activity and bike respect for other people. And I do very much support the offset crossing as opposed to the mixing lanes, which tend to be pretty unnerving for a bikist. And also I've been in in vehicles in those zones too, and they're very confusing. So I think that's a great move. I have two comments I wanted to address. One is the comment that previously about the bus lane. And I've observed double parking on that east side of the street fairly frequently. And what that does is block the bus lane, which then has to travel into the next lane, congesting the normal traffic through there. So I'm just wondering if you've looked at creating a bus only lane in that eastern travel lane that could be enforced with bus cameras just to keep that clear for buses. I think it would also greatly improve the travel speeds of the buses going up and up 6th Avenue through that area. So question of whether DOT has worked with the MTA to look at that possibility. And then I have a second comment after that, if you could just answer that.
Sure. I think that's something that could definitely be on the table. That's not part of this project, except for the northern section, just where we are converting this east travel lane to a bus lane. But for the larger part of the corridor, currently we're gonna keep it. I mean, it is largely bus stops with some commercial parking and tucked in between, but at this point we're not talking about turning it into a bus lane.
Okay, I would just keep in mind that this is a transit infrastructure as well. So hopefully that's part of the long-term thinking here. And I do understand this is a sort of a minimal infrastructure improvement in terms of actual concrete and asphalt. So hopefully the experience from this will lead to even more changes, more improvements. My second comment and questions has to do with the section of 6th Avenue between 32nd and 34th, which actually is a two-way bike lane. And the reason for that is because the two-way bike lanes on Broadway, as they head north towards Greeley Square, shift over to 6th Avenue at 32nd Street. It's a very short section of block. It's, probably like a sixth of a length of a normal block, but within that block, there's one eastbound travel lane of cars, and there's a eastbound and a westbound bike lane split on both sides of the street. And it's, I can say as a bike rider and as a pedestrian, it's a really congested zone. And I think there's opportunities to, within a project like this, without any major concrete improvements, to shift the bike lanes to make that work better. And there's multiple ways of doing that, but I could just say one option would be on 31st Street coming up Broadway, to rather than having the shift from Broadway to 6th Avenue happen on 32nd, it could happen on 31st. And I know there's some bus parking zones on the north side of that street, which often block that side, but there is a parking lane on the south side that presumably could be eliminated for a bike lane. Conversely, if that didn't work, the northbound bike lane on Broadway could be extended through the Greeley Square Plaza to 33rd Street, and the crossing over to 6th could happen literally at the intersection of 6th and 33rd. And that would free up some of the space on 32nd in this congested zone I mentioned. And I would also say, just coming southbound on a bike, approaching 32nd Street to shift over to Broadway, it's extremely awkward to do that shift on the south side of the street, simply because there's no queuing space while you're waiting for the signal. So if you have a signal to cross over 32nd heading southbound, you'll be stopped there, and literally only one bike can queue up at the intersection. So if that remains, that crossings remains at 32nd, I would suggest shifting that to the north side of 32nd Street rather than the south side. Therefore, the queuing could happen on the north side of the street. Again, I think these could happen pretty easily, and perhaps that could be taken into account as you look at your final design. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, next up is Brandon Tesh.
Good evening. I'll just keep this brief, but I use this corridor about 2 to 4 times a week, especially as the connection to Central Park was done a few years ago. And I would be in favor of this project. I would appreciate the wider bike lanes. They are more accommodating to a variety of different riders and bikes, and more passing opportunities. I mean, there's a subtle incline just north of 24th Street that can sometimes get jammed up after that light cycle. So the lanes are great, but what excites me most, as some previous folks have said, are the offset turn lanes. The mixing zones in this corridor just feel unsafe, and there's lots of conflicts, and using the offset turns are just a lot easier throughout the city. I would also just follow up with Charles's comments. Some of the high friction points would be like Trader Joe's. And then there's also a hotel between 29th Street and 30th Street that's sometimes a little congested or challenging to navigate. Otherwise, I'm a fan, and would look forward to using this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Christopher Sanders.
Okay, thank you, Community Board 5, for letting me speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I live in Herald Square, and I support this program, the bike lane on 6th Avenue. It's too small, and you have the e-bikes, they're going crazy. If you're like, I typically go between 12 and 15 miles an hour. They're chomping at the bit behind me or on the side of me, trying to, they're going to take my arm off when I'm riding my bike. But I was hoping that you all could do the little strips, the little bumpy strips or whatever, at the intersections to like make people like pause a little bit or pump their brakes a little bit so they can see what's going on in front of them when they're riding the e-bike and all that. But generally, I love this. I hated the mixing zone, so anything that forces the driver to turn and see me as a pedestrian or cyclist is great. And yeah, so those are my comments.
All right, next up is Ashish. Ashish, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, maybe we'll come back to you. Nina.
Yeah, in terms of the conflict between the pedestrian and the turning bike, does the DOT use any seeded asphalt, textured asphalt, chip seal, anything like that to slow the bikes down, and also it provides texture for the pedestrians?
Do you mean like in this kind of situation, or like where's the bike turning, or?
Yes, just to slow it at the end of at the point of conflict, not the entire, not talking about the entire bike.
Yeah, Not, I mean, there are crosswalks. That would be the extent of it.
Is it used, I mean, I'm seeing that chip seal, I'm just doing a little Googling, chip seal is used in some places. There's lots of discussions about how fast people can go, bikes can go on smooth surfaces. So I guess I am asking the question about seeded asphalt or textured surfaces to slow down bikes and also provide texture for, textured surface for pedestrians is always beneficial.
We can look into that. It's not something that we're currently using to my knowledge, but it sounds interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's it for questions and comments from the public and the committee. I mean, Joel. Comment on a couple of things that were said just. Sure, yeah. So one of the things that was said was that DOT did not yet have statistics on safety of wider bike lanes. A separate comment was that DOT shows overall decline in injuries generally since the advent of bike lanes, since the installations of bike lanes. But none of those statistics, as DOT has told us repeatedly, because of the vehicle and traffic law, note when a pedestrian is injured, whether by a car or by a bike, it's noted as a vehicle injury or a vehicle or death. So there are no separate statistics for that. Nevertheless, on two occasions that I know of, DOT has provided those statistics. So Kim Wiley Schwartz, who used to be at DOT, reported to this committee, it was during lockdown, I remember seeing it on video before we were meeting in person, that 9 pedestrians had been killed by bikes in the previous 8 years. At that point, there was about 8 years, 7 or 8 years of Vision Zero. This year or last month, Commissioner Rodriguez reported to the City Council that 10 pedestrians have been killed by bikes last year. So that seems to me an 8-fold increase in the number of pedestrians killed by bikes. At the same time, the use of bikes, especially e-bikes, which are incredibly fast and heavy, has gone up a lot. It makes sense. But there is nothing in any of these proposals or anything we've heard from DOT that's looking to remedy that situation or make it better or be responsive to pedestrian safety in a way that's going to work. The second thing I just want to comment on is Mr. Johnston said, and I think I got this exactly, having a travel lane that's too wide encourages speeding. So that's exactly my point. Having a bike lane that's 250% as wide as your own standards mandate, with a 3-foot protected lane on top of that and a parking lane next to it, is encouraging speeding. It's encouraging e-bikes, and it's encouraging, in addition, people to go the wrong way. I just think all this extra space is great, and we should take this extra space and put it where it needs to be, which is to make pedestrians safer by widening sidewalks and installing safe pedestrian space. That just in response to what they said.
I did look up, just out of curiosity, how many traffic fatalities in New York City there were last year. So this would, I guess, include both bike and car because they're put together, 251. So if 10 are bikes, I guess that's 241 that are caused by cars. But I would move to make a motion to write a resolution to support the proposal.
Second.
Yeah, Joel, I mean, I'd like to, we had the same amount of time of notice for this as we've had for a lot of other large.
5 days, 5 days.
Yeah, but it's the same, you know.
Nobody's here, except for Janet Liff and the people she brought from Transportation Alternatives. There are no members of the public.
Yeah.
We didn't give notice. We didn't give proper notice under our own guidelines.
Yeah, I'm just.
It's inappropriate.
Yeah, I don't agree. I find that it's the same amount of time for everything that we ever do in the committee. And given the timing for this, I really don't want to just push this off in the hope that additional people show up. So we got the same reaction on this as we had from other items. I feel like we should put it up for a vote. And let's see what happens, and if it fails, then, then we'll deal with that separately.
I just need to notice my objection to that, given that we haven't taken up similar issues, which are about things like what was it, Intro 66, that if we're gonna take this up for a vote, we should have taken Intro 66 up.
Yeah, I mean, look, the example is the $5 city bike that we didn't take up because it was clear that the committee was deeply split about it. And it wasn't worth the time because they weren't prepared either. That's not what we have here. We have a New York City agency coming to us with a time frame similar to everything we've dealt with in the past. So I don't see them as.
I wasn't referencing that. I was referencing Intro 66 about the
It's not,
registration and licensing.
nothing's happening with that. I mean, I know these questions keep coming up on 606, but nothing is happening on it. So.
All right, should I take it to a vote?
Yes.
All right.
Well, is that adequate? Are you gonna write this up?
I can write it, it's fine.
Okay.
Or Ankur can write it.
What
Yeah.
is it gonna say? So it would help to know what we're gonna vote on.
It sounds like
And
you're gonna vote
frequently
no
things go-
regardless.
Well,
so I don't know
let's
why it
not do
matters.
that.
Or don't cut me off.
Yeah. And let's explain what the motion is.
All right, I mean, it'll be similar to the one that we talked about before, that was for Pershing Square South. I'll go through the video and note all the comments from the public and from the committee members. And then say, regardless of all these concerns, Community Board 5 still supports the implementation of this project. All right, Ankur? Yes. Annie?
Yes.
Christopher?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
James Michael?
No.
Is Mohit still on?
Yes.
Is that a yes vote or a yes you're still on?
A yes vote and a yes that I'm still on.
Nancy?
Yes.
Neil?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Tiffany?
Yes.
Tristan is not here. Zool told me he left. George, is George still here? George, are you a yes or a no? If you could do a thumbs up or thumbs down, that would be great.
It's on the top left.
He's behind his computer.
Yeah, could you do a thumbs up or thumbs down a little higher? I can't see it. All right, that's a thumbs up. Great, thank you. And then Joel. No, great. All right, the resolution passes 10 in favor to no, and then 0 PNE and 0 abstentions.
Okay. The Pershing Square thing is, who's gonna write that one up?
I can write that one too. That's fine.
You're gonna crank it?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay, all right, and so if you can circulate the draft. What's the reason, by the end of the week?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Jesse, are you still with us?
Hello, yes, I am.
Okay, so we will move on to our discussion on ghost plates.
Great. I am, just to get us started, I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. I want to show you a social media video that we did related to our ghost plates plan, just to kind of give some background, and then I'll jump into the discussion. But let's see. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. This is only about 90 seconds.
I'm sure you've noticed more and more cars in New York City with license plates that are obscured by a dark cover or partially blocked, just plain missing, or actually fake. What's happening here? These are drivers who are cheating on paying tolls or on paying fines for things like running a red light or speeding at a time when more and more enforcement is being done by automated cameras snapping pictures of plates. But if the plates are missing or obscured or fake, the driver pays nothing. This is against the law, it's cheating all of us, and it makes our streets less safe. We estimate that now over 5% of cars passing through tolls in New York City have unreadable plates. And almost 100,000 times per month, there's a red light camera or speed camera which is triggered, but there's no way to collect the fine. This is costing us millions, and it's allowing people to drive dangerously with impunity. So we're rolling out a plan to tackle this. We're calling for tougher penalties for driving with an improperly registered car, including higher fines and points on your license. We want digital tags added to registration stickers and much more. License plate fraud is unfair and unsafe. Let's team up to end it in New York City. I'm sure you've
Okay. So I'm just gonna talk through a couple of the specifics of the plan and give like a little bit more background information. This was like a very broad overview that the borough president gave in this video. But essentially this was a plan that we rolled out last August because this is an issue of growing concern. I'm sure that lots of you have seen news coverage about it and statistics about how bad this is getting, as well as probably have seen cars yourself with license plate covers or fraudulent plates driving around or parked in New York City. So this is an issue that's gotten so bad that in our report, we estimated that the city is losing about $200 million a year in lost revenue due to a combination of unpaid tolls and traffic cameras. And I just looked at the updated statistics today for DOT red light and speed cameras specifically. And last year, the DOT reported that there were about 1.4 million unticketable red light and speed camera violations. And most of those are due to either entirely missing plates, temporary paper plates, and marred or obstructed plates in some way. This doesn't mean that there were 1.4 million people who did this last year. We suspect that the vast majority of these are repeat offenders. And that's really concerning. Losing out on the revenue is concerning enough, but really like a huge concern is that people driving cars with obstructed or fraudulent license plates aren't getting ticketed for unsafe driving, and so therefore they have no deterrent to stop reckless behavior and improve the safety of their driving. And we know that because for people the vast majority of people who are doing the right thing and have their car legally registered and their license plate visible, for those people who do get red light and speed camera tickets, both from cameras and NYPD enforcement, we know that they work to reduce the instance of unsafe driving and that it's much less likely to be a repeat offender if you're actually getting ticketed for that behavior. And then another big issue about this is that we're increasingly seeing that these ghost cars are often used in hit and runs and violent crimes in New York City, and it makes investigating those crimes much more difficult and ensuring that people are brought to justice for doing those. So, and then finally, with congestion pricing now starting, we all, really want to, we want to see this program be successful and for it to raise the revenue that is statutorily required and that the MTA aims to raise. But that means that we need to actually collect the toll from everybody who is driving into the zone. And so we're glad to see that there has been some increase in enforcement, mostly over last fall and kind of into congestion pricing starting this year. But we do still feel that there is right now, people feel that there's a very large incentive to cover or obstruct or have fraudulent license plates in some way. And we still need to do a lot more. So you can see the full plan on our website. It's the Ghost Car Governance Plan. But I just wanted to share a couple of what I think are low hanging fruit pieces of the plan where I think the city can really take action pretty immediately and has the authority to do so on its own. So these are mostly focused on improving the city's ability to enforce against people with obstructed or covered or fraudulent license plates on their vehicles. One step is that we are calling for providing NYPD traffic enforcement officers with increased tools and training to recognize and ticket fraudulent and obstructed license plates. And this really goes especially for parked cars. I see these cars all the time, parked on the streets, but it is often very difficult for NYPD to enforce against them if they don't have the tools to actually like run the license plate of every single car that they see to see if it's fraudulent. Another thing that the state gave us permission to do last year is to do VIN-based ticketing, so vehicle identification number ticketing, in place of or in addition to license plate and registration-based ticketing. But we still need to roll out additional training to NYPD to make sure that they know where to find a VIN on the car, like how to document it properly and how to write a ticket against it. And we have heard from NYPD that parking violations can really be difficult for them to prioritize when they're operating with limited resources and may have other like more urgent priorities. So we really want there to be some dedicated action and attention to this from the NYPD. We also think that it's really important to increase the fines and penalties for vehicle owners caught with fraudulent license plates. So that can be done both through moving violations as well as parking fines, but the city is in a position to raise fines for parked vehicles with these types of violations themselves. City council can just pass legislation to increase those fines. And so like, for example, the fine for a parked vehicle with an obstructed license plate is only $50 per offense. We think that is way too low given, what people who drive these vehicles are getting away with. So we would like to see it, I think, at least doubled, but I think, we'd be happy to hear any increase for that, just so that there's much more of a deterrent for that behavior. We also want both the city and state, or really particularly the city, to take a more active role in stopping the sale of both fraudulent license plates, so like the paper plates that we often see, and license plate covers and other tools that are used to obstruct license plates. And this is especially for online retailers selling to New York City buyers. This is something, selling devices to obscure license plates has been illegal in New York City for several years now. City Council passed legislation against that a few years ago. The state also recently banned the sale of these devices statewide, which went into effect in September. But the online retailers have been particularly difficult to crack down on. And that's really especially like retailers like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and TikTok. And I think we've seen a little bit of progress. We actually, as part of the rollout of this plan, we wrote a series of letters to those online retailers, and TikTok actually especially responded that they were trying to do more to take those items down because they were against the terms of service for the website, and it's just straightforwardly illegal. But it's like very much like for these platforms playing whack-a-mole to try to like get every single one down, and like somebody will just deactivate their account and then start a new one and sell them again. And so really like the city needs to play a stronger role in enforcing against that and finding ways to block the sale to New York City customers. And then finally, we just want more data transparency. We actually called on the MTA last year to release camera data from the congestion pricing cameras, because we know that we have heard reports that those cameras have been on since last spring, just like passively collecting data and not collecting tolls. And those cameras, in addition to now collecting tolls, are a huge asset for providing data on traffic monitoring and like providing a more complete picture of the scope of the problem, as well as because of their position on New York City streets, not just at bridges and tunnels, they would potentially provide data that could help with additional enforcement strategies and like pinpoint where the most enforcement is needed. So those are like kind of a few of where we see as being the low-hanging fruits. And there's a few other elements to the plan, as I mentioned, but I'm going to keep it pretty quick with the presentation, and I strongly invite you all to look at the full plan on our website. But I am happy to take any questions or comments or anything that the board wants to share.
But what is the borough president, are you looking for a resolution from us supporting the direction of the borough president's ghost car, the document that you had shared with us?
Yeah, so I think I think you could think about this in a couple of different ways, and like obviously it depends on what feels right to the community board and where you feel you have the most potential to have some sway. The like 4 areas that I just described, I think are where like a little bit of additional advocacy could be particularly impactful. I think that particularly for some of the other things that policy changes that we're calling for in the plan, we for many of them would need state legislation to approve them, and so like they're a higher lift in some way. So I think if you felt that you agreed with the whole package and wanted to pass a resolution supporting the whole package, I think that would certainly be welcome. But if it seemed like it could be more impactful to direct a resolution to New York City government, the areas that I talked about are where I think a community board could be most impactful in saying, like, New York City government, this is what we would like you to advance legislation to help with.
And is there specific timing? Because we haven't really had a full discussion of the whole document. So other than, your presentation tonight, the committee has not looked at, I think maybe months ago, we circulated the document, but we haven't had a discussion. I don't know that we have time tonight to start from ground zero on this. So is there a specific timing that you're looking for, or?
I think that yes and no. I think that this is going to be an issue that will be with us for a little while longer, and so if it feels like thinking this over and maybe discussing it at a future meeting is the better approach for CB5. I think we would welcome your support at any time that you are able to provide it. I will say that for the tools and training piece for NYPD that I mentioned, that for that one, there could be a specific budget ask, because really to provide additional tools and training, more funding is needed to go along with that. But the city budget is due June 1st, so that's still quite a ways away.
Right. I think our Bex committee, we passed the resolution on this last month. So for us, it's in the rearview mirror, but
okay.
I'll take any comments, but I think my proposal on this would be, let me circulate the document and we can review it and talk about it at next month's meeting.
Just have a question while we have her.
Yep, sure.
Yeah.
So just with You said something about like you'd be interested in like doubling the fine. Is there like a reason you're looking at it like so limited, or that it's not like automatic impounding? And then like, or some exorbitant, much higher number, like $1,000 or $5,000. And then the other thing is, have you, I understand the conversation, and I've seen discussions about this elsewhere, that there has been some success with TikTok particularly, but not necessarily with all of these sort of social media networks that are also performing commerce at the same time. But like, is there like a civil cause of action directly against them separately from where you guys could recoup at least some of the money? Or is that something being entertained? And like, just to like answer these questions in advance of a conversation next month that you might not be here for, that I don't want to push something that would be not appealing to you guys.
Yeah. Okay, let me try to answer those questions one at a time. So for the first one around what the fines are, I think and like potentially more severe penalties like impounding vehicles, etc. I will say that we have seen that in the past legislation in city council to like really, really dramatically increase parking violations tends to not move. And so I think, you know, we're looking at both what would be an improvement, but also is, you know, is feasible, hopefully in the near term. I think with the hope that like, you know, even if we were to raise the fine of, you know, of for obscured license plates from $50 to $100, I think many people and potentially the borough president would agree that that's, you know, still not enough of a deterrent for that behavior. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't then, you know, like in the more medium to longer term, increase the fines again, or like, you know, build into the legislation in some way. Like we should have some sort of fee structure so that like, you know, your first offense maybe is $100 fine, your second offense is like a $200 fine, and it can ramp up in that way. But I think, you know, if the community board has specific thoughts for what the fine should be, I think, you know, we would like to see it raised, and you know, aren't necessarily married to a specific number. For the impoundment, this is I think a sort of complicated question. You probably didn't mean it to be like quite a loaded question. But we have heard from the NYPD that impounding vehicles is a really persistent challenge in New York City, because there is a lack of tow pound capacity in New York City, and like pretty persistently tow pounds are at, you know, like 97 to 99% capacity. We don't really have a great explanation for why that is, but that you know, we do know that the space is incredibly limited. And so the feedback that we've heard is that it would not be feasible to start like en masse towing vehicles from New York City streets, because there just like wouldn't be anywhere to put them. I do think that a potential solution that could be in addition to fines could be like booting vehicles as well, because then, you know, like somebody has to then like pay a fine to get the boot removed. But the NYPD isn't necessarily needing to deal with like, where do we take this car? And then your third question about potential like civil suits against these online retailers. I am not a lawyer, so I can't give legal advice on that question. I will say that our office cannot like directly bring those types of suits against those types of retailers. That would be something that would have to come more centrally from the New York City government. It's not something that like any lone elected official can do, except for the mayor, I think. But like I think that if you know, if somebody felt that they had standing to sue for this, I certainly don't think that is something that our office would object to the premise of. I'm not sure necessarily what the standing would be though, and like what harm you would say was caused here.
I bought one and I got a ticket.
Right, but, right, I was just, yeah, I was more wondering, like, yes, within the office, if it was something that had been brought up. I mean, obviously, yeah, it would have to come from somewhere else, but if it was something but anyway, thank you for your answers.
Sure, yeah, and that actually was a question that we hadn't heard before, so it is something that like I'm happy to look more into, but that's kind of my on the fly answer.
Are we in questions or comments?
Whatever you can do.
I support this fully. I don't need to know more. I could vote on a resolution to now based on what we know tonight and move this forward because this is just as bad as driving without a license. And we talked tonight about how cars really hurt people and hurt bikers. And so if there's no punishment, there's no anything stopping people without these license plates from driving with very bad behavior, breaking laws, speeding, going through red lights. I think we should I would say I'm ready to do a resolution tonight.
I would agree with that, and I would suggest that even furthering to what just Michael said is to push that we drive the incentive to be way outside $100 fine.
Yes.
But make it seem as though it's an outrageous fine. I was suggesting like that terminology can be subject to whomever is gonna make that decision, like move that down the line, but I think that this is a danger to people on the streets.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of moving along. I think maybe surprisingly, I'm not in favor of a massive fine off the bat. Instead, I would much prefer a progressive fine. So the first fine, I think, would be fine to be $100, but then the next one could be $1,000. Just so, you know, I really want to I want the repeat offenders to really be feeling the pain, not the people who, I guess, I don't know how you would do this by mistake, but like in theory did this by mistake.
Something accidental happens here.
I think that there is an argument that some people are making regarding
Mud on your license plate?
like. I have read that there's like far exceptions. These are outliers among, so perhaps in like favor of anyone falling into this category, but like a collectible car or something. I mean, that like there have been some commentary that I've read elsewhere, but I mean, I think that makes sense to me. If it's a second offense, sure.
I mean, I know that this issue is wrapped up with things like school zone speed tickets where it's the same problem. So I think there have been discussions generally about progressive fines for these types of things and booting, you know, so I think this may be caught up in a larger issue, but yeah, Joel.
I understand what you said about the problem with impounding. That was going to be my first question, but it seems to me if you're just doing a fine and especially if it's starting at $100, that's not going to solve the problem. If you put a boot on, then for the person to get the boot off, they should show up with a plate, not just show up with a check for $100 or $50. Like, why do you let the car go if they're not legal? Mike, I had two other questions, just real quick. You talked about getting data from MTA. Can you also get data from Port Authority? Because they seem to have like huge problems at the GW Bridge. And my other question was, is this going to include mopeds, which have a lot of obstructed plates? Let's say they just bend them up so you can't see them.
Yes, so for your first like question comment about the $50 fine that I was talking about, that was for like covered and obstructed license plates. I think it's maybe like about $65 for a parked car with like a missing or fraudulent license plate. But absolutely, like if there is no record of a vehicle registration, like I think, you know, we absolutely agree that there should be proof that the vehicle is legally registered before you're allowed to like then operate the vehicle. That I think that's really important. That's a good point that you brought up. For your question about Port Authority, that yes, we would like to see more data transparency from the Port Authority. Our call for the MTA was specifically for the data that the congestion pricing cameras is collecting, because that's really like a much larger data set for many, many more vehicles that are driving into the zone. It's like many more cameras that's providing a lot of data. But yes, we would like to see data transparency from other tolling agencies, including the Port Authority as well. And sorry, can you just remind me what your third question was? Oh yes, yes, mopeds. Yes, very important issue. We did mention it. I think we mentioned it in the plan as well. But as I'm sure many of you know, mopeds in New York do need to be registered and have a valid license plate to be operating on New York City streets. And actually many of the uncollectible fines and violations that DOT reported from their traffic cameras are from mopeds and motorcycles. So yes, like this is a problem that is already the law, and we would like to see these penalties applied equally to people with mopeds as well.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the license plate, but I would add, let's do the VIN chip as well. The vehicle identification number chip as well. I mean, if you are caught, you now have a higher level of reporting than just the license plate. You need the vehicle identification number chip as well. And I also think the big problem is going to be enforcement. I believe the fees need to be high enough that it's worth someone's while and value to actually enforce what's going on. I think that's if it's $100, the police department has too many other things to do. Who is going to enforce this? That's the problem we have with e-bikes. That's the problem we have with mopeds, is enforcement. So we need to add value to enforcement so it's worth the city's while to actually have money coming in from these scofflaws.
Let me just, Neil.
Yeah, I was wondering, or I guess one suggestion, probably hard, it's definitely not directly in our control, but is working with other states. I'm from New Jersey, probably New Jersey is sort of part of the problem, driving in with covered plates. Gotta own up there. But you know, I know the Turnpike has tolls, Port Authority between the states. So I wonder if there's any way to collaborate with them. Also, yeah, I mean, I would be in favor of the fines being higher, especially on like a progressive scale, you know, for your second or subsequent offense. I was driving one time and got like pulled over in a rental car and got pulled over, I think, when like a police officer's like scanner thought that the license plate was obscured, and then they got out and looked at it and there wasn't anything really with it. So, you know, the automatic enforcement, if you're automatically ticketing based on the camera, I guess enforcement is also tough through the cameras because you don't know who the car is. But yeah, I mean, I think the higher it's driving without a plate, basically it's driving unidentified. So it is really dangerous and should be treated, you know, on par with driving without a plate.
Thank you. And yeah, just one thing I want to mention on your point is the kind of two things along the like interstate cooperation angle. And what the DOT is actually doing, they are like just wrapping up rulemaking to clarify like what an obstructed plate means essentially, and like kind of clarify the language around like what that offense looks like. And part of that is actually is now finally allowing enforcement of covered license plates against New Jersey drivers with parked vehicles and like other states as well, in addition to New York City plates, because previously they could only write tickets for covered plates for New York City drivers, which I actually was not aware of until recently. And then we suspect that like the feedback to the rulemaking was overwhelmingly positive, so I think that it's going to go through pretty easily. On the broader like interstate collaboration, this is something that we did call for in the plan specifically. There are some states, Massachusetts is one, that have reciprocity agreements between New York City and or New York State and like various neighboring states that allow for like these are mostly for when a moving vehicle with a driver in it is stopped, but that allow for like much more severe penalties that in many cases only New York City registered vehicles and drivers, like such as being arrested and having your car removed on the spot. But there are other states, including New Jersey, that do not have these reciprocity agreements with us that allow for like the highest level of enforcement to occur. But this is something that like we called for it. It is very complicated because it involves both our state government and working with another state government. And I'm sure that you all know that New Jersey is not our largest fan right now. So I don't know what their willingness is to work with us on this. But so it is part of the plan. It is not what I would call one of the lower hanging fruit items of the plan.
Sure.
Okay. Christopher.
I mean, it seems like people just like the plan the way it is and we could support it, then that's just fine. I don't know why, do we have to be that specific? Like, we're not deciding any of these numbers. We can say like, the fine should be much larger or 10 times larger, like some arbitrary number, and then also say like, we like the idea of progressive fines that would account for X or Y, but like, just put what our general opinion is about, you know, this kind of like ramping up the enforcement and then endorsing the borough president's plan, because it seems like, you know, I don't see any opposition to it. I certainly don't oppose it. I'm 100% for it.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, but like, yeah, that's why I wanted to just ask those questions now so that like we could get clarity on like, I mean, and I agree with Nancy that this is basically the same as like driving without a license and unidentified, and it's still, and actually, like, I was thinking about being like super contrarian and being like, this is exactly like the e-bikes, but and then being like, I'm not gonna vote for it because of that, but that's just silly. Like, no, I think it's great. And I think we can leave it, as Chris said, we can leave the language vague, and Samir also brought up that there's a reason not to be so aggressive the first time. So I think there's some reasonable consensus to make.
Okay.
We could just fold the e-bikes into the same road.
I don't think that'll.
Well, you could certainly include a part that said like, we would like similar enforcement for all modes of transportation.
Right. Well, and actually, just to follow up, like, my problem is not with bikes or whatever in general. My problem is with like people not being held responsible for misbehaving no matter what they're driving.
That's
and that includes cars.
Yeah, I mean, and as Jesse
Yeah.
said, it's actually a relatively small number of people who commit a large percentage of these.
Even SNL commented on it.
Yeah, e-bike. Okay, any comments from the public on this before we move?
All right. No. Christopher, do you want to make the motion?
Sure, I move that we support we support the borough president's plan for addressing ghost plates in the city and include the comments that we've had in this committee.
I second.
All right, Umfer is gone. Annie,
Yes.
Christopher,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
James Michael,
Yes.
Mohit, are you still there?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Neil?
Yeah.
I'm a yes. Tiffany?
Yes.
Tristan's not here. Isabel's gone. Is George still here? George, are you still here? Can you put your camera on and do a thumbs up or thumbs down? All right. All right, and then Joel?
Yes.
All right. So I will mark George as abstain or absent. What do you want to do?
We could do it as a mistake.
All right, abstain. Okay, so it passes 10 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstention.
And who's gonna write this one up?
Christopher made the motion, so.
You broke in, all right.
I'll circulate
You have more time.
the document, so at least you can start from there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the weekend.
Oh, yeah, because it's before the board meeting.
Yeah, we,
You have to have it ready the Monday before the XCOM. That's when she wants to get them, but they probably want to.
yeah, we want to see a draft, so we can.
Hopefully
review.
this one won't be too bad.
Okay, thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you all for your support. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, what was the fifth item?
Well, it's this letter, which I think we can do relatively quick.
Are we not doing, it's Sunny Simone, he's not coming?
No, he's not coming.
Great, okay.
Where was he gonna come from?
There's a proposal, or he's developing a proposal to do an open street on Broadway between 35th and 36th.
Oh, that's, okay, thank you, yes, sir.
That the next thing.
No, it's, that's put off till next month.
Oh.
So the next thing is that we, DOT came to us with their discussion of, what's gonna be happening with 34th Street. It's sort of short of a busway. It's, conceptual, and they were looking for feedback from the community boards. And so we coordinated with CB4 and CB6 and the whole length of 34th Street and came up with a draft letter. We had all seen the same presentation. And so I don't know, do you want to throw this up on the screen?
Yeah, it's very, very, very similar to the letter that we did for 42nd Street.
Yeah.
Almost verbatim, well, not almost verbatim. There's a few changes here and there, but mostly contextual, like we're not gonna talk about Times Square because now we're talking about Herald Square.
Yeah.
So, a couple differences here and there. So here's the letter. I can highlight the parts that are different from before. So, it was for 42nd, now it's for 34th. That was one,
Are we gonna vote on this?
yes.
Yeah. This won't take long.
This, yeah, I'll be quick. And then the landmarks that are relevant, the buses are different. But generally, at a very high level, it's saying that the buses got better on 14th Street when they widened the sidewalks and they put in the busway. And because of that, we supported the 42nd Street similar letter supporting wider sidewalks in the busway. And this is basically the exact same thing, saying that we again want that overcrowded sidewalks are an issue. We want wider sidewalks and we want a busway to be considered. And that we think it is a necessary and forward-thinking step towards improving public transportation, reducing congestion, enhancing public pedestrian safety, and supporting economic vitality on this busy corridor.
And the only question I had was a versioning question. Did we keep the bold out language? That paragraph above that, see the second line of that, yeah. I wasn't sure if, because when I went onto the shared document, it was in it, but I thought when we talked about it, people wanted to take it out, so.
I'm not sure. I think what I would say is that for the purposes of this discussion, we can say, are you leaving these?
No, I just.
We need quorum.
I'm voting yes.
For the purposes of this discussion, I would say that we should support the bulb outs, and if they don't want to, we can just remove that specific language.
Who makes this decision? Is it DOT that makes the decision, or does it have to go to the council or something?
The DOT.
DOT. So this is addressed to DOT?
Yes, this is addressed to DOT and the relevant electeds, so Mark Levine, Keith Powers, Eric Botcher.
And this was the presentation that was the it's not like an entire like water to water. It's the thing that we heard. that it's
No,
like-
42nd Street was the one that
was
was
like
7th to
only
8th.
the
plus
7th to 8th, right,
This
so this is
was,
all-
basically water to water. It's just that it wasn't fully defined yet. It hasn't gone that far in the design process.
The presentation
Is it-
they
but
gave
it's not
us,
like they're gonna block all traffic everywhere, right? They were saying that it's in certain areas. Okay. Like closer to 14th then.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I think, yeah, where the community board ended up was that we're supportive of a bus.
Oh, even if it's.
Yeah,
Okay.
the DOT didn't go that far. And so we said, we're supportive of a busway. If you come back to us in April or whatever the timing is, and you say you want a busway, we'd be good with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So.
got it.
So it doesn't deal with the residential stuff on the, it's like. On 34th, there's a bunch of residential, which when we did 14th Street, we dealt specifically with, they still had to have access for.
Right, I mean,
Drop off and pick up.
yeah, we didn't get into that level of detail, but
Okay.
I mean, whatever the solution was on 14th Street, they would do the
Right,
same
and
kind of.
this is not our last opportunity to talk
Yeah.
about this, like, this is just basically giving them a high level idea that what we might wanna see, and then when they come to us with the final plan, we can definitely say like, oh, here, you should make sure you do this, make sure you do that.
Right.
So we will have that time.
And it's one letter from all three boards?
Correct.
Mhm.
We have found that
Yeah.
it gives it more
Yeah.
chutzpah. Is that right?
I don't think
No?
so.
Okay.
I'm not
I
the
tried.
We just appreciate the effort.
Comments online, or can we just move to do that?
I mean, there is someone
Yeah.
raising their hand, so I think we should. Miriam?
Yes, I'm from, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm the one who earlier raised the issue of better bus stops with seats and shelter from the weather. I'm from Community Board 4. I saw the draft that they had written, and I asked them to amend it, and they did. I think they called it a friendly amendment. Is this something that you could also consider to raise awareness that this is something that we all need, not only people with disabilities, but shelter from the weather, which we expect is going to just get worse, snow, rain, the heat, and this be something that is now on the radar, on the agenda that people look at. I couldn't read all the details of your letter, but I assume you have Community Board 4's letter, and I believe it was amended, and I was at the meeting where Jesse said that they were going to add that, Jesse Greenwald.
Okay, well, I mean, we did add that on the 42nd Street one. So we'll go back and coordinate with our CB4 and 6 partners on this and,
That sounds like
Yeah.
something we can include in the motion to approve this, like, to update reflecting the traffic and things like that.
yeah, it's really just a question of sending
Making
out
sure
one
all
letter
three
for the
get-
3,
yeah.
so I just want to make sure.
All right,
we have it covered.
for the remaining speakers, it is 9:04, so if you could be very brief, we would be much appreciated. Danielle?
Thank you. 34th Street should be given the 14th Street treatment and made into a real busway. So that would really solve a lot of the traffic issues and make the buses run faster on the street. So I support a full busway on 34th Street.
Great.
Thank you.
Damayanti?
Yes, thank you. Well, this is something very good to us because we are considering proposing entire Broadway from 14th Street to Columbus Circle car-free. So yes, absolutely. Of course, the bikes will likely still go through this area, but the rest of the place will be open to people. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's everyone. All right. So, because you and I are coordinating with them, I'll make the motion. So motion to approve sending this letter, potentially with amendments for the bus shelter. And what was the other one? What was this? Was that it? That was it. Great. All right.
Oh, the bulb app question.
And potentially removing bulb outs.
Yeah.
All right, Encore is gone. Annie?
Yes.
Christopher?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
James Michael?
Yes.
Mohit?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Neil? Is gone? No, Neil's there. Neil's here.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Here's yes. Tiffany?
Yes.
He's not here. Joel's not here. George is gone. And Joel?
Yes.
Great. Passes 10-0-0-0.
All right.
Great.
Thank you very much.
All right, let me turn off the meeting.
Yes.
Joe, can we